Okay, so GMO, greetings, Yedase. We thank everybody for tuning in. This is a special live stream that we're doing. With stream goes on Zoom, but also on our YouTube page live, so people who are subscribers on YouTube can see, tune into the broadcast and so forth. So this is actually a continuation of a series, and some of you attended live our Hoodoo Mind, Hoodoo Nation Festival, which took place on October 15th. That was our 8th annual festival on Hoodoo Mind, Hoodoo Nation Festival. Of course, for those who are unaware, I am Odwirafo, Kwesi, Rane Hampata, Akan Odwirafo of Akwamu Mind, Maruka Tifimu, the Akwamu Nation in North America within Ojira Mind, the Purified Nation, Afro-Akani people, African Black people in the Western Hemisphere. Also, the founder of Hoodoo Jase Dine, which is the hearth shrine of Akan Ancestral Religion in North America. So this is a continuation of a series on the Hoodoo tradition. And what we're showing and going into detail about is the cultural identity of the Hoodoo tradition. And of course, the Hoodoo tradition, the Hoodoo religion, is specifically Akan Ancestral Religion that was preserved by our Akan Ancestresses and Ancestors when they were forced into North America during what we call the Mmusuo Kese, the Great Perversity, the Enslavement era. When we were forced into this region, we maintained our ancestral religious practices. And of course, we were powered and guided by the Abosom and Nananom Nsamanfo, our spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, which are the Nananom Nsamanfo, as well as the Abosom, the forces in nature. We were empowered and guided by them to wage war against the whites and their offspring, kill them, massacre them, force the end of enslavement, free ourselves from enslavement, and so forth. So there's a lot of misinformation being propagated via the internet about the Hoodoo tradition. You have individuals talking about Hoodoo as the mixture of a number of different traditions, which is inaccurate. Just want to make sure that sound was coming through clearly. People talking about Hoodoo as an amalgamation of different African traditions. Very often, people believing that it comes from the Congo, which is totally inaccurate, or some mixture of pseudo-Native Americanism or pseudo-European occultism or folk traditions and so forth. It's totally false. Hoodoo is specifically and only Akan Ancestral Religion. Akan people being forced into North America and continuing our Akan ancestral religious practices, and we've continued that for hundreds of years up until this moment. So we have published a number of articles, a book, some journals, as well as a number of articles and so forth, detailing the Akan identity of the Hoodoo tradition. We're going to get into some more detail, specifically dealing with the Hoodoo Pantheon. One of the great diversions with regard to the tradition are people claiming that there are no deities in the Hoodoo tradition. Hold on, let me let some people get in. All right. They claim that there are no deities in the Hoodoo tradition. Hoodoo is not a religion, it's just a folk tradition. It has to do with botanical arts and so forth. And it's not like voodoo, and we don't have a pantheon of deities. What people are really saying is they don't know who the deities in the Hoodoo tradition are. And since they don't know who they are, they would rather claim that they don't exist. And they'll just say things like, well, we just work with our ancestors, or we work with elements in nature, and we don't deal with personification of forces, which is purely idiotic. It proves that these individuals do not know, and most of them who are talking about that are not Akan, so they're not inheritors or inheritrresses of the Hoodoo tradition. For example, if someone was Yoruba and they were forced into North America, the Yoruba people continued Yoruba ancestral religion under the Yoruba term juju, and Ju in Yoruba means to cast, to throw, and so forth. So the juju man or juju woman was the Yoruba man and Yoruba woman. The juju man and juju woman is the Yoruba priest and Yoruba priestess in North America that's been preserved for hundreds of years. The priesthood and priestesshood is intact. It's not dependent on traveling to Nigeria or anywhere in the Caribbean and South America to reclaim the Yoruba tradition. The Juju man and Juju woman has been here for hundreds of years. The same thing with an Ewe person who was forced from the Ewe empires and so forth into North America. They practiced the Ewe tradition under the term voodoo. So the voodoo man and voodoo woman was the Ewe man and Ewe woman, and later the Fon man and Fon woman and so forth. They continued the Ewe voodoo priestesshood and so forth intact. The same thing happened with Akan people. We were forced into North America and we maintained the Akan tradition under the Akan term Undu. And in the Akwamu Akan dialect, Undu means medicine from roots, trees, and plant life. It also means to become heavy with the spirit through spirit possession and spirit communication. It also means to feel a presentiment of foreboding, to see what's unfolding in the spirit realm so you can manifest with and understand what's happening in this unseen realm so you can address it in the seen. That's an Akan term. We popularly maintain that term as the catch-all term for the tradition. So the Undu or Hoodoo man and Hoodoo woman is the priest and priestess in the Akan tradition. We maintained our Akan priesthoods and priestesshoods intact for 300 plus years up until this very moment. So for those who are not actually Akan, you can't practice the Hoodoo tradition. Just like those who are not actually Yoruba, not spirigenetically Yoruba, you did not inherit the Yoruba ancestresses and ancestors and their energy and their specific unique complex of energy. You didn't inherit the unique manner in which the Orisha deal with your blood circle. Akan people deal with the forces in nature that we call Abosom, as we will see, and the unique manner in which the Abosom interact with our clans. And we've incorporated that in our spirigenetic blood circles and passed that on intergenerationally and transcarnationally through successive reincarnations, through specific matriclans and patriclans, the unique relationship that we forge with the forces of nature and our specific Akan ancestresses and ancestors. That is a relationship that only can be embraced by those who are part of that blood circle. If you're not part of that blood circle, you do not have that genetic and spirigenetic signature, so you can't practice the tradition. You can't just imitate somebody else's tradition. It's no different than a leopard or a hawk or a giraffe and so forth. They're all animals, but they can't practice each other's way of life or culture. Their diets are not the same. The way they operate in the world are not the same and so forth. The way they give birth and so forth is different. They can't just decide, because I'm an animal, I can practice any animal culture. They are not spirigenetically wired to practice any other way of life other than the ones that they are wired to practice. The same is true with us, because the whites in our offspring don't know that, and then some of us imitate white pseudo scholars and so forth. We don't know that either, so we think, well, just because we're African, we can just practice anything. And what's happening is people are misinforming across the board. So let's get into some detailed information. Okay. So first we're going to go to one of our books just to catch people up on some of these linguistic details. And just so you can see, for those who were not able to attend, just over a week ago, we had our Hoodoo Mind, Hoodoo Nation Festival, 8th annual, and you will see the information there. You'll see this is the video from the 4 hours of presentations, myself, as well as Jojo and Ama Ma'ati, the entire 4 hours of presentations and so forth. You can check that out on the page. And then we have some of the most recent presentations that we've done on the Hoodoo tradition there, as well as detailed information about the conference that we have annually. But let's get to our other page. Okay, so on our Hoodoo People page, we established this specific page to be a resource on accurate information on the Hoodoo tradition and so forth. Our seminal publication is Hoodoo People. Let's click on that. We're just going to go over some basic information with regard to language and so forth. It's Hoodoo people, Afro-Akanu, Afro-Akaitnu Africans in North America, Akan custodians of Hoodoo from ancient Hoodoo, Ndunu land, Kanit, Nubia. So we show the direct, unbroken, spirogenetic, blood circle lineage or circulage from ancient Kanit and Kemet, Nubian Egypt, through West Africa, the Akan empires in the western part of the continent, directly into North America, unbroken. So, and this is what this imagery is reflective of. You see the ancient Kanitu, the Nubians, the Kan people, and so forth. Then you have Akan people in West Africa, and then you have the warriors and warrioresses, including Nana Abena Araminta, so-called Harriet Tubman, who was actually Akan by ancestry, and they found that out. She knew that and talked about that and talked about her grandmother being forced from the Akan region of Ghana and so forth, specifically the Asante people, sometimes mispronounced Ashanti and so forth. Recently, over the past few years, her descendants took DNA tests and confirmed that, but so in our text, we show in the Asante Fanti dictionary, the Twi language dictionary, the Akan dictionary of the Akan language, which is often called the Twi language or the Akan language and so forth. In the Asante Akan dialect, the Asante is a large Akan group. So there are about 26 million at this point, about 26 million Akan people in West Africa between Ghana and Ivory Coast, about 13, 14 million in Ghana, about 12 million or so in Ivory Coast. And collectively, those are false borders, those are recent borders and so forth. But that entire territory, about 26 million or so Akan people in the western part of the continent. One of the largest Akan subgroups is the Asante. Then the next largest group is the Fanti. Then another large group is the Akwamu, which we happen to be a part of and so forth. So there are different Akan dialects, but they're all mutually intelligible. They can all understand each other. They're just slight variations in dialect. So for example, if someone is a Afua, a woman born on Fida or Friday and so forth, under the dominion of the divinity Afi and so forth, someone's called Afua. In the Asante dialect, in the Fanti dialect, they'll be called Efua. Instead of Afua, they'll say Efua. If someone is born on a Wukuda or Kuada Wednesday and they're called Akua, the Fanti will say Ekua. So those are slight dialectical variants and so forth. The term for medicine, powder medicine and so forth is Eduru, and plural, as you can see with the N, is Nduru, Nduru. In the Asante dialect, it's Nduru. In the Akwamu dialect, it's Du, plural, Ndu. So in the Akwamu dialect, we say Ndu, which means medicine. The Asante people say Nduru, medicine, and so forth. We showed that this specific term in ancient Kemet, the Egyptologists would stick an E in between consonants when they didn't understand what the vowel placement was, but it's really spelled U-T-N. We know the proper pronunciation is Ndun. They'll talk about fat or grease, but as we see, it means medicinal substance and so forth. So that's Ndun. And remember to turn your mics off when you come in, so there's no background noise and so forth. So you look at the term dua or dria, to plant. Then you have plural, edria, well, singular edria, plants, trees, shrubs, and so forth, plural, ndua or ndria. So the undu, the medicine, comes from the undua, the plant life, the trees, the shrubs, and so forth. So we showed that the term undu, the fat or grease, but it's really the medicinal substance. And the same word is undun, a kind of tree. That's in ancient Kemet. In the Akan language, as you can see here, du, plural, undu, means medicine. It comes from the undua, the trees, the plant life, and so forth. So we show in Akan, undu, in the Akwamu dialect, unduru, in the Asante dialect, medicine, medicinal substance. Undun, in ancient Kemet, also undunu, in ancient Kemet, medicine, medicinal substance. Undua, tree, plants in the Akan language, Ndun, tree, plants in ancient Kemet. We're just showing the connection between our ancestral language and we continue to speak that language. Nsin means the stump of a tree. Odun, sin is the medicine. Ndu from the tree stumps or stalks and so forth. And the Odun sini is the native physician, medicine man, charmer, or medicine woman. In this dictionary that was written in the 1800s, they will also say sorcerer, wizard, and so forth. But the Odun sini, singular, or Odun sini fo, plural, is the one that deals with the medicine from the roots, the trees, the stumps, the stalks, and so forth. That is the root doctor, the Odun sini fo. Now, then you also have the Oduru yefo, also Odu yefo. They'll say physician or doctor. The term ye means to make, to work, to do. So Odun ye, to make or work, ye, the Ndu, the medicine, as opposed to the Odun sin, that's the one that takes the trunks of the trees and the stumps and stalks and so forth and makes the medicine. So one is a root worker, Ndu yefo, ye means to work, to do. Odu yefo, Ndu yefo, the root worker. Odun sin fo, the root doctor. So the terms root worker, root doctor, tied into the Ndu, the medicine, coming from the Nduwa, the trees, plants, stumps, and so forth. Odun sinifo, root doctor. Odun yefo, root worker. We're the first to show the etymology of the term hoodoo, while others were trying to say it came from the Irish or the Jews or other Europeans or the Congo or other kinds of nonsense. They don't understand the interconnectedness with this root term. Then we also show do, plural ndu, also means heaviness or weight. In the Asante dialect, nduru, heavy, weighty. And then you see the same spelling of the same term, ndun in ancient Kemet, also means to be heavy or weight. So the word for medicine, ndu, is also the word for to become heavy or weight. I'm talking about becoming heavy with the spirit through spirit possession and spirit communication. Undu means medicine. Undu means to become heavy or weighty and so forth. Undun in ancient Kemet means medicine. Undun, the exact same word in ancient Kemet, means to be heavy or weight. So we have the same term with two different meanings in Akan, same term with the same two different meanings in ancient Kemet. And then we show the same thing here with the glyph or the medut of the upturned palm, which is the D sound, the dust sound instead of the T sound. Utun is Udun. Hold on 1 second. All right. All right. So as you can see, Akan, Ndu, medicine, Ndun in ancient Kemet, medicine, medicinal substance, Ndua, tree, plant, or plants, Ndun, tree, plant, or plants in ancient Kemet, Du, or Ndu, plural, heavy or weight, Ndunu, heavy or weight in ancient Kemet. And then we have the same term, as you can see here, Du in the Akwamu dialect, Dudu in the Asante dialect. And what does it say? To descend, dismount, alight, come, or go down. Descend into, to strike of lightning, to feel a presentiment, foreboding. He has a presentiment of his heart forebodes fearful things. Giving an example, talking about something that descends, alights upon, goes down into. So Ndu is the medicine from the roots, trees, plant life. Ndu means to become heavy, heavy with the spirit through spirit possession, spirit communication. And once spirit possession happens, the spirit comes down, alights upon, comes down into Ndu in the individual through spirit possession. And then they feel a presentiment or a foreboding. They can see what's unfolding spiritually in the future and let people know what's happening. That's divination. So Ndu meaning medicine, Ndu to be heavy, Ndu to feel a presentiment or foreboding as the spirit comes down or descends or alights. That is the definition of hoodoo in North America. So, and so in this particular text, we show, the varied definitions of these various things. We go into some more information. Undu also means the offerings of meat and drink, which are set on the altar, a table or altar for offerings and so forth, which is the undu that you give. In ancient Kemet, same thing when we say we give the hoodoo and so forth, we provide the hoodoo and so forth, that's the offering to the divinity. And then we talk about how you have Undunu, a title of one of the divinities of divination, Undunu, the deities, a solar divinity, but also plural Undunu, the divinities and so forth. That's the title of the hoodoo spirits and so forth. And then one of the texts from ancient Kemet over 3,500 years ago, Undunu, Ntoroku, Sautu, Erna, Betau Tu, when offering to your deity, guard against that which he abominates. When making the ritual offerings, the Undunu or Undun, when you're making the Undun ritual offerings to the Abosom, to the Untoro, the deity that you're invoking, guard against that which the divinity abominates, which is taboo. It's showing that when we're talking about in ancient Kemet giving the offering, we're giving the Undu. We've been saying we're giving the hoodoo, giving the medicine, giving the offering from ancient Kemet through the Akan language in West Africa into North America, unbroken for thousands of years. So we just want to go through that quickly, just to lay that foundation. Of course, Undun is a title of ancient Nubia and so forth. So we show these relationships, and this is why our text is a seminal work, because it's the first to prove conclusively that the term Undu is an Akan term. That's the origin of the term hoodoo, and it goes back to ancient Kemet. So Undu, medicine, from the Unduwa, the trees, plant or plants. Undu is a heaviness of weight to descend upon, ritual medicine offerings, even talk about embalming. Odwirafo, the spirit conjurer, the root worker and so forth. Odun Sinifo, the root doctor and so forth, and all of that. Now let's get into this topic. And actually, let me switch real quick. We touched on this in one of the previous broadcasts, just to give you some more insight in what we're dealing with. We have to reclaim and properly define the hoodoo tradition from those who are misinforming our people about the tradition. And you have individuals, of course, the whites and their offspring, attempting to talk about the hoodoo tradition. Of course, no white individual can ever practice hoodoo or any African ancestral religion under any circumstances. The deities have never communicated with nor possessed them and never will. So the only people who can practice Afro-Akani or African ancestral tradition, whether it's Yoruba tradition, Igbo, Akan, Bakongo, Ewe, Dogon, whatever it is, are Afro-Akani people, African Black people, and the people of that specific ethnic group, because they forged a specific relationship with the forces of nature and their spirit-genetic matriclans and patriclans, and that's the reason we have a culture. So when you align with that culture you are born and incarnate of, there's a specific means by which you align with the forces in creation. Just because some people have forgotten about that, we've been conditioned by Europeans, doesn't mean it's not reality, it's reality. So believing people can just jump and join the Yoruba tradition or join the Akan tradition. If you're Black, as long as you're Black, you can just join these things. What you're really doing is just imitating what other people are doing, but you're putting your own tradition on the back burner, your own ancestresses and ancestors on the back burner while you're imitating other individuals. Your ancestresses and ancestors want you to return to your spirit genetic tradition, no matter what it is. If you're from the Gola or Kese people from Sierra Leone and so forth, and which manifests as the Gullah and Geechee people in North America, then that's your tradition. If you're from the Wanga practicing people in Namibia and Angola, which the Ovambo people, that Wanga tradition was brought back into North America and still called throwing the Wanga and so forth. That is your tradition. If you're from the Ngangan tradition of the Fang people in Gabon and Cameroon and so forth, that tradition was preserved as Ngangan or Gang and so forth in North America. So whatever your tradition is, that's what you're naturally wired to practice. You're naturally formed to practice. So we have Akan cosmological terms. We're not going to go through all of these because we did that in few previous broadcasts and so forth. But just to catch people up, just like we talked about, Undu is the Akan term. In North America, is hoodoo. The Akan term, kanche, to utter incantations, ka, to bring the spirits forward, che, kanche, came to be pronounced the kanche man and kanje woman. And Europeans thought we were saying conjure man and conjure woman, but we were saying kanche man and kanche woman. The kanje man, kanje woman is the kanche man and kanje woman and so forth from the Akan tradition. Hinti is an Akan term. That's the origin of the term haint. We did a 1-hour broadcast and presentation on that at the Hoodoo Mind Festival. That is up on YouTube. You can check that out. The Akan class to priesthood is Komfo, also pronounced Komfwa in the Asante dialect. Komfwa is the Gofwa doctor with the Gofwa dust and so forth. We did an entire piece, written document on Jama Kakaru, the great Asafohene, the warrior king, the warrior chief. Nyama, also called Jama, was forced from Ghana during enslavement into the West Indies, St. John's Island and so forth, in so-called 1733. The Akwamu warriors and warrioresses came together, overthrew the White Snarl Spring and took over the entire island of St. John for 6 months. And that he is the individual that they call High John the Conqueror. He was called Jama, King Jama, by his people. The Danes called him Konge Jonni, meaning King Jonni and so forth. English writers wrote it as King John and so forth, His Highness John. And the term Kakaru is the sacred root. That's the name of it in Akan. Kakaru, the biting, kaka, undu, hoodoo, medicine, and the rubbing, kaka, undu, medicine. The Kakaru came to be pronounced the conquer root or conqueror root. That's Kakaru and so forth. That this is a plant that his spirit went into after they committed suicide instead of being captured by the enemy. So we went into detail about that. The term Jo in Akan, meaning to lament or wail through ritual wailing, ritual shouting, and so forth, is the origin of the shout and the ring shout. Akan people dance in a counterclockwise circle to generate a vortex of energy for the Abosom and Nsamanfo deities and ancestral spirits to become possessed. That ring shout comes from that, the Jo becoming the show or the shout. Then we have the Moja and Ja, which is the Mojo and Jack, these talismans. And we did an entire piece on that, which is up on YouTube as well. We talked about the Mojo, the Moja, the blood talisman, the Matriclan talisman, the blood talisman. The term Moja means blood. It became Moja and Mojo and so forth. That red flannel bag and so forth. And the Ja, also called the Ja Padie or Aja Padie, is the Patriclan talisman connected to the Patriclan deity. The Moja is the Matriclan talisman associated with the female Matriclan divinity. These divinities are inherited through the Matriclans and Patriclans, specifically of Akan people. Therefore, if you're not Akan, making up a little mojo bag in the hoodoo tradition or, trying to imitate that, you're not really practicing the tradition. If you don't know who the female divinity that governs that Matriclan is, then you're not really making a moja bag. The moja has to do with the ovulatory blood and menstrual blood that carries the ovum that's connected to a specific clan and a specific female divinity. And the same with the Ja, which became known as the Jock or Jack. There's a specific Patriclan divinity associated with that pack and so forth. If you don't know who that divinity is, connected to your blood circle, then you can say you're making a jack or a jack ball and so forth, but you're really not. And yes, other traditions make, different kinds of talismans and so forth, but they're also, when you practice the real tradition, whether it's juju or gree-gree in the Mindi tradition and so forth, it's always connected to specific deities associated with the blood circle. If you don't know who those deities of the blood circle are, and people are just making up gree-gree bags or mojo bags and so forth, they're not doing anything. They're working with deceased spirits that are uncultivated, some related and unrelated, and passing them off as deities. And that is not our tradition. So we go into detail about that, and we show the, that the mojo bag, coming from the Akan term moja, which means blood, is actually the red bag inside the woman, which is the endometrium, the lining that lines the uterus that's shed during, menstruation and so forth. But that is the original mojo or moja, the blood moja bag and so forth, that carries the element that has power, that's associated with the divinity. The spiritual force that animated the ovum is the matriclan divinity. And we have the same thing with the jack ball and so forth. That is specifically a patriclan talisman, and that's why it's in a white cloth and so forth, sometimes in a leather pouch and so forth. It has to do with the deity that animates the sperm cell that's connected to the patriclan divinity, the Abosom, as it's called in Akan. If you don't know who that Abosom, or father's divinity, is, or if you don't know who the Abosom, the female matriclan divinity, is, then you're really not making a mojo bag, and you're really not making a jack or jack ball. You're just imitating some people, making some things up, and hoping some wayward deceased spirit will help you do something, and then you'll pass it off as tradition. Sometimes they help people, and sometimes they don't. So that's what we were talking about in that section. Okay, now, so let's get on to the details for tonight. So we have the term Hoodoo Pantheon, and we use the term Abosommagua. So Abosom is the plural for the term Abosom. It means the gods and goddesses, the divine spirit forces that animate creation. So there is a major Hoodoo pantheon. It has always been a major Hoodoo pantheon. There have always been deities associated with the, Hoodoo tradition. People who are not Akan don't know who these deities are. They don't even know it exists. So let's get into them. And there's a reason why we utilize this specific symbolism for the show. We have these different planets that look like stars, of course, in the nighttime and so forth, these different planets aligning with the moon and so forth. And then this mineral life, different colors of mineral life and so forth, placed in a river on Earth and so forth. And then the different layers of the earth. So first, what is the term Abosom? We're talking about gods and goddesses, but in the Akan language, the Abosom, that's the term. The term Abosom, and this is from the Asante Fanti Dictionary. This dictionary is published in the 1800s, and we're going to get into the reason why of course, we can utilize this, but we can show that the information here, we compare with the hieroglyphic dictionary of our language from thousands of years ago, and we have the same words, the same meanings, the same deities, the same functions in creation in the hieroglyphic dictionary and hieroglyphic writing of ancient Kemet that we have in the Akan tradition today, and that was preserved and is preserved in the Hoodoo tradition in North America. So, Abosom, tutelar or guardian spirit of a town or family. And of course, the Europeans who went into Ghana, the region what is today Ghana, in the mid-1800s, they wanted to compile a dictionary to learn the language and so forth, sitting with the people, asking them, what do you call a dog? Okramine, okay, they write that down. What do you call a cat? Okra, or meow, they write that down. What is the word for a stone? Obua, they write that down. What is the term for, earth? Asase, then they write that down. They want to, create a dictionary, because their goal was, after they created a dictionary and learned the language, then they would translate the Bible into the tree language so that they could brainwash the people. But first they had to, compile a dictionary. So when they're sitting there in the mid-1850s, sitting with people, and you'll see, in parentheses, when people are giving long, stories to give greater context for what these certain terms and idioms mean. They're sitting with our people, our ancestresses and ancestors, and our ancestresses and ancestors were speaking. Some of these people were younger. Some of them were elders and eldresses. So if in 1854, if they're sitting and asking an elder or elderess, what does this word mean and what is the name of this deity and who is this deity? And they tell them, this is the name of the deity, Ayisi or Ajo or Bena and so forth. And this is the, what their function is. If they're an elder in 1850, if they were 90 years old, that means they were born in so-called 1760. And they're talking about the tradition they learned as they grew and developed, and they learned from their grandparents who were born in the early 1700s and some even in the 1600s and so forth. So when they say imaginary spirits subordinate to God, worshiped or consulted by the natives, generally called fetishes by Europeans, though the term fetish would better be restricted to asumai, a charm or a talisman, or to avoid confusion, not to be used at all, because Europeans started calling the shrines of our deities the fetishes, from the Portuguese term fetico, a fetish, something that you just fetishize and so forth, trying to reduce it to something inferior. In reality, the deities, the Abosom, are the spirits that animate the sun, moon, stars, planets, oceans, rivers, black substance of space, the children of the Great Mother and Great Father Supreme Being. That's the term Abosom, what it means. And they will talk about, and they don't understand why, and even Akan, writers and scholars try to break down the term. They know Abo means stone or rock. Som means to serve, to be a servant or a subject. He serves me and so forth. Osom also means, service, servitude, talking about the religious tradition and so forth. Onyame Som means to serve. Som, Onyame, the great father, and Inyame was the great mother and so forth. So that's a term for religion, to serve the supreme being and so forth. So they would say Abo, stone or rock, Som, to serve. They'll say, oh, they were serving or worshiping Som, the stone. So they'll say, oh, they were worshiping stones. That's what Europeans would try to say. Ebo also means a potter's clay. Ebo also means a piece or a figure of brass or other metal, a stone or a seed used for a weight. But it also means it is dear, costly, precious, and so forth, something that's everlasting and precious and dear and costly and so forth. So they're trying to figure out, why would we use the term Abosom to reference the deities, to serve something that's precious and dear and so forth, and everlasting, the stones that make up the earth and so forth is everlasting and so forth, to serve stones. But what's really taking place, we show the actual cosmology behind it. And this ties directly into what we're getting into tonight. So the reason why we showed this, the inner core of Earth. You see, you have the core of Earth and the inner core, and then you have the mantle, lower mantle, upper mantle, and then lower crust and upper crust and so forth. Deep within the core of Earth, the inner core is a crystallized form. And when you look at geology and so forth in the layers of Earth, you have this crystallized form that everything is revolving around. The more liquid outer core is revolving around the crystallized inner core. There's a combination of crystalline elements and so forth that make up the inner core, as well as the inner core and so forth. And there are deities that's the shrine of these divinities at the inner core and so forth. But that generates the electromagnetic field that surrounds the Earth, the magnetosphere and so forth, the liquid core moving around the crystalline inner core and so forth. that generates these thermodynamics that keeps the earth, warm and, keeps it protected with the magnetosphere from the powerful ultraviolet rays of the sun and so forth, and allows the earth to have an atmosphere and so forth so that life can manifest. Now let's look at our page right quick. The reason why we showed the stars in the sky and so forth, when you look at these solar, lunar, and planetary bodies and then these stars and so forth, and then you look at the earth, and let's just look at the comparison once again. The reason we have these planets in the sky that look like stars, you have the black substance of space, and then you have these luminous entities. You look at the planet Bennu, which is called Mars, and it looks reddish. The planet Uranus, which looks, greenish and so forth, bluish green. The planet, which we call Ya, the planet Abba, which they call Neptune and so forth, looks bluish and so forth. These different radiant, glowing entities, these spherical entities within the black substance of space. These are the shrines in space for the forces in nature. When you look on Earth and you have black soil, you dig within the earth and so forth, there's black soil, but within that black soil, there are radiant, luminous entities, which are these crystal elements, whether it's, the ore from which gold is taken or iron is taken or silver or whatever it is, or other crystals and so forth. You have radiant, luminous entities within the black soil. And these radiant, luminous entities, this mineral life, which includes metals and so forth, these are the shrines of the energy of the divinities on Earth. And in the sky, when we look at the black substance of space, that is an actual entity. In our culture, we call it Ka and Kaet, the male and female divinity of the black substance of space. The whites in our spring now call that dark energy and dark matter, the substance that makes up over 99+% of the universe, and all the planets, suns, moons, stars, comets, and everything else exists within that black entity. That is mineral life as well. So you have that black substance, and you have luminous entities that operate within that black substance that govern all of creation. On a microcosmic level, you have a black substance, soil, you have luminous entities, metal life, mineral life, and so forth, luminous entities within the black substance that are shrines, centers of resonance for the various forces in creation. That's why it's Abo, stone, mineral life, Som, to serve Abo. Abosom, to serve the Abo and so forth. Abo also means to create and creative power and so forth, to serve the creative power, one of the creative powers, one or more of the creative powers and so forth, but to show that the original shrines of the deities in creation, before the earth is formed, are the first stars that were formed, the power sources in creation, these luminous entities in the black substance, those are the first shrines. The spirit of the creator and creatress penetrate those first shrines and make them luminous, and planets come out of the stars and so forth, and the spiritual force of Ra and Rayado and Yonkumpon and Yonkuton penetrate the original formation of these planets and illuminate them and give them vitality and so forth, and separate them and so forth into different elements. And the different mineral life forms on Earth become the shrines of the divinities, and we make our shrines up to the deities and the ancestral spirits from this mineral life that is found in Earth and so forth. And it goes into the water and the atmosphere and everything else. But this is why we have Abosom as a title for these forces in creation. And that's something that various Akan scholars are unaware of. So let's go back to our page. Now, this is our page. You see the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies. These are what we call the Akradim Bosom in the Akan tradition. These are the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies and the spiritual forces that animate the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies. These are the divinities that govern the 7-day week. The 7-day week cycle is a cycle that Akan people have been utilizing for the past thousands of years before Europeans had it, before we carried it into ancient Kangi, which would later be called Sumer and Babylon and so forth. But the sun, moon, Benna, Awuku, Akua, Yao, Ya, Aba, Afi, Amen, and so forth, that cycle of the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that manifests every 7 days and also has an effect on our chronobiology and so forth every 7 days. These are the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that are shrines for male and female divinities that govern all natural cycles in creation, but they also govern the spiritual head of every Akan individual. We call them the Akradim Bosom, the Abosom, the deities of the soul name and so forth. So, if you look at a chart and you see these charts, they'll say, well, Akan people name their children after the days of the week. If you're born on Wednesday and you're a woman, you're called Akua. If you're born on Wednesday and you're a male, you're called Kweku or Kwaku. If you're born on Sunday and you're a male, you're called Kwesi. If you're a female, you're Akosua or Akosua or Essi, and different variations and so forth. So why is that the case? You have the day of the week, the deity, the female Akradin or soul name, the male Akradin or soul name, and then the praise names, the Mrane, the praise names of each one. So what is the basis of that? This is where we get to the actual Hoodoo Pantheon. Each day, the term Da means day. It means day in Akan. It means the same thing in ancient Kemet. So each day is governed by one of the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, and then the spiritual forces that animate the solar, lunar, or planetary bodies. So Sunday, of course, is governed by the sun, which is the Oriya in Akan. The male divinity is Awusi. The female divinity is Essi, that's Alsar and Alset in ancient Kemet. As they operate in harmony with Ra and Ra'at, penetrating the sun, they possess the sun, just like a spirit can possess a person through ritual dance and so forth. The spirit possession happens, just like the spirit can get into the body of a person and operate through the body of a person. Spirits can also possess the sun, possess the moon, possess the planets, and so forth. Possess the earth, and that's why you have an earth mother, male and female, two female earth mother divinities, as well as male spirits operating within earth and so forth. That is spirit possession. When Alsar and Alset are possessing the sun and using the sun to transmit their energy in harmony with Inyokumpon and Inyokuntone or Ra and Ra'at, they are called Awusi and Essi in the Akan tradition. And people born on that day, it's an indication that they were assigned to that divinity pre-incarnation, so they came into the world to carry that divinity's energy. So Awusi and Essi, and a person born, a male born on Sunday, he's a Kwa Asi, or Kwa Wusi, or Kwa Wesi, and so forth, Kwa Si or Kwesi, a servant Kwa of the divinity Awusi or Asi. He's a servant of Asi. And a woman is a Essi or a Kosuya or a Kwasia, a Kwasiba, different variations of the same name. She's one who carries the energy of the divinity Essi into the world. Monday is the day of the moon. In Akan, that's Jo, the cool one. So it's Jo Da, the day Da of the Jo, the cool one, the moon. So that's moon day or Monday. And the divinities are Ajo and Ajua. That's Alsar and Alset operating through the moon, when they use the moon to transmit their energy, that lunar cool energy and so forth. So someone who is Kwa, Ajo, or Kwajo, or Kojo, or Kujo, and so forth, the servant of the divinity Ajo. A woman born on Monday is Ajua, a servant of the female divinity Ajo, operating through the moon. And then you see Benada, Awukuda, Kuada, and so forth. These are the deities Benna and Abena. Now let's look at their images real quick in our chart here. This is a chart where we show how the Akradin Bosom are the same divinities from ancient Kemet with the same names in the hieroglyphic or Medutu language as they have in the Akan tradition, and they also govern the major body systems. In Akan, the divinity is called Awusi. He is called Awusi or Alsar in ancient Kemet. He's called Obatala in Yoruba. He's called Dangbe in Vodun. He's called Agwu in Igbo. Same divinity. Operating within the sun and so forth, governs the endocrine system. Ajua, a title of Alset when she's operating through the moon, governing the lunar energy. So that's Joda, the day of Ajua and so forth, the moon. She's called Alset in ancient Kemet. She governs the womb and birth canal and so forth, the reproductive aspect. She's called Minona in Vodun, the great mother, dealing with birth and, parturition and so forth. Not the great mother of creation, but the one that governs the womb, specifically the womb and birth canal. She is Odua, the wife of Obatala in Yoruba and so forth. She is Idemili in Igbo. The planet Mars, male and female divinities, are Abena in Akan and Benna in Akan. They're called Sekhmet and Heru Bedat or Heru Bedet in ancient Kemet. They're Iyami Abeni in Yoruba and Ogun in Yoruba and so forth. They govern the lymphatic system, immune system. And as you see, you have Akua, the planet Mercury on the feminine side, Awuku, which is Kwekwa Nansi, the messenger, the trickster, and so forth. On the masculine side, that's Kweku and Akua. Some were born on Tuesday or Benada. A male is Kwapena, a female is Abdena, and so forth. On Thursday, Yao, that's the title of Heru in ancient Kemet. It's the same name in our Akan tradition today and in North America. Yao, he's also called Kwao. The planet Yao, which they call Jupiter and so forth, that is Heru, a title of Heru and so forth, governs the cardiovascular system. And I should have said Bena and Abena govern the immune and lymphatic system. Aku and Awuku govern the renal system and nervous system. Heru governs the cardiovascular system and so forth. Ya and Abba are Uranus and Neptune in the Akan tradition. The spirit forces that animate that, they are Wachet and Nekabet in ancient Kemet. They are Avejida in Vodun and Ayaba in Vodun. They are Oya in Yoruba and Oba, the first wife of Shango in the Yoruba tradition. Oya and Oba is Ya and Aba and Akan, Avejida and Ayaba and Vodun and so forth. And then you have Afi, which is also Afia, Afua, which is a title of Heru in ancient Kemet. It is her same title in Akan. She's Oshun in Yoruba and Erzuli or Azili and so forth in Vodun. And then you have Amen Men in the Akan tradition. People are called Kwame if they're born on Memenida, on his day. They are Ama. There's a form of Het Heru or Afi, where she's called Amemeniwa and so forth. She's the wife of Amemen and so forth. So people are called Ama if they're born on Saturday, if it's a woman, Kwame or Kwamena or Kwame and so forth. If it's a male, on Friday or Fida, it's Kofi for males, Afur or Afia or F4, Fia for females and so forth. And on Thursday, Ya for females or Abba for females and so forth. And as we said, Kwao or Yao in Akan. So every day of the week is governed by one of the solar, lunar, or planetary bodies. The energy of one of these forces is bathing the earth and so forth, and it's more dominant on that day. So Sunday, the sun, Monday, the moon, Tuesday, Benna, Abena, which is the so-called planet Mars, but it's Benna and Abena. Wednesday, which is Awukuda, Hakuada, divinity Awuku, Akua, which is the planet Mercury and so forth. Thursday, Yao, as well as Ya and Abba, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and so forth, which, we call Yao, Ya and Abba. The planet Venus, which is called Afi in Akan, and the spiritual force that animates that planet is Het Heru, which she is called Cheche in Akan, but she's also called Afi. She's called Het in ancient Kemet, but she's also called Fi in ancient Kemet. She's called Cheche in Akan, but also called Afi or Afia or Afua. And then you have the planet Saturn, which is called Amini and Akan. And the divinity is Amen Men, which is Kwame, and the person is called Kwame, as we said. So these different solar, lunar, and planetary bodies govern the planet Earth and bathe the planet Earth's energy with their energy on these different days of the week. So there's a different energetic signature that governs each day of the week. There's a different energetic profile that governs each day of the week. And when we're born on a specific day, in the Akan tradition, that's an indication to the community that this individual was assigned to that particular deity as an ancestor and ancestress in the ancestral realm before they incarnated. And since they were assigned to that divinity before they incarnated, the deity made sure that that person would be born on their day to let the community know, listen, this is a child of Benna. So if you're born on Tuesday, Benada, and you're a male, that means that you were assigned to the deity Benna pre-incarnation, and then you were sent into the womb to carry that fiery red warrior type energy into the human sphere, into the communal sphere. And so you're called Kwa Benna, that's your soul name, your Akradin, because you're a servant of the deity Benna. I was born on Sunday, Akwesida Awusida. That means before I entered into my mother's womb, I was sent before Nyamewa Nyame, the great mother, great father, and they assigned the deity Awusi to my head, my spiritual head, and he governs my spiritual head. So he makes sure that I'm born on his day to let the community know this is the child of Awusi, Kwa Awusi, or Kwasi, or Kwesi, and so forth. And the same with all the others. If a woman is born on Fida or Friday, she just doesn't happen to have the name, Afia or Afua, because she happens to be born on a Friday. For Akan people, because of the relationship we forge with the deities, the reason why she was born on Friday or Fida is specifically because she was assigned to Afi, Nana Afi, the great elderess divinity Afi, or Heru. Her title is Afi, because she was assigned to her, that spirit was installed in her spiritual head. The female divinity Afi made sure that this ancestress would be sent into the womb and be born on a Fida, on a Friday, to let the community know, this is one of my children. She's carrying my energy into the world. Her soul name, her Kradin, is Afia or Afua or Afuia, Efua, depending on the dialect and so forth. She's carrying that energy into the communal sphere. Whatever day of the week you're born on, you carry that energy into the communal sphere because that energy needs to be within the population. Now, okay, so we have that chart, and we also show the different body systems that they govern. Just like there are shrines, solar, lunar, and planetary shrines for these divinities. On Earth, they have their shrines as well. They operate through the oceans, rivers, mountains, ionosphere, the various aspects of Earth. And then within our bodies on a microcosmic level, each one of these divinities have their own shrine within our bodies. Endocrine system, reproductive system, lymphatic, immune, renal, nervous, cardiovascular, respiratory, digestive, exocrine, or skeletal. So, and then we also show that their numbers in the Akan language, the proper actual numerology of these 11 different divinities. Not the pseudo-numerology of the Kabbalah and other, practices. So we have a comparative chart here. The day of the week, Sunday through Monday, Akwesida, Owusida through Memenida. The divinity in Akan, Awusi, Ajua, Bena, Abena, Awuku, Akua, Yao, Ya, Aba, Afi, Amen, Men, and so forth. And then there are counterparts in the Yoruba tradition, Obatala, Oduwa, Ogun, Iyami Abeni, Eshu and Iberu, Shango, Oya, Oba, Oshun, Orisha Oko. And the same thing in Vodou with Dangbe and Minonan, Ogu and Ananu and Legba, Koni Koni, Evioso, Avejida, Ayaba, Azili, Azaka. And then the same divinities and their titles in ancient Kemet, Alsar and Alset, Peru Behudet and Sekhmet, Set Denebit Het, Heru Wachet Nekabet, Het Heru Namemen. So when you see that chart, you'll see that we're showing they're not similarities, they're the exact same divinity. Sometimes people say you can't make a one-to-one correspondence in different systems. You can if you know who the deities actually are. If you don't know who the deities are, then you'll make a false correspondence. For example, people will say, well, Set is really Yemoja, but Yemoja is actually the divinity Mut, the great mother Mut in ancient Kemet, the wife of Amen and so forth, and the mother of Su, and the one who governs the oceans and so forth. That's Yemoja in Yoruba. It's not Set. Set is actually Odua, the wife of Obatala. So when you know who the actual deities are, there is a one-to-one correspondence. The Yoruba people call the sun Orun. Akan people call the sun Oria. In ancient Kemet, the sun is called Aten or Atenit. That's a one-to-one correspondence. We're all talking about the same orb. We just have different names for it. There's no confusion. It's not like one group is talking about some other star and somebody else is talking about another. When we look at the exact same orb, we're looking at the same entity, and in each language we have a different name, but it's talking about the exact same entity. When you know who the deities are, these same divinities deal with all Afro-Akani people. But based on our culture and the way that we forge a relationship with them, we have our own language and approach to them that's different. But because of that, we have a specific culture, and that's why you can't jump from one culture to the next, because it's spirit-genetic and it's wired in your spirit-genetic DNA. So now when we understand that these divinities that govern the 7 days of the week, but they have specific names in the Akan tradition, and the way that we learned and were taught how to interface with these forces in nature, and the way we interface with them generated a unique configuration of energy, and that entered into us through spirit possession, spirit communication, altered our cells and so forth. And then when we gave birth, by passing on that altered DNA to, our children, our offspring, generation after generation, we resonate at a certain frequency that's different than other ethnic groups. Every ethnic group has its own frequency. Just like you have different frequencies for different radio stations. If you're attuned to one frequency, you're not going to hear the other station unless you attune to that frequency. So we've built a relationship that's wired in our spirit genetic DNA with these different divinities, and our culture is an outgrowth of that intergenerational and transcarnational relationship. So you don't try to jump outside of your DNA to pretend like you're participating in the DNA of somebody else. An alligator can see that it's an animal and can also see that a fish is also an animal that has eyes and a mouth and a nose and so forth. They can say, well, I'm an animal and the fish is an animal. We both need water, we both need air, we both need nutrients and so forth. So I can just imitate fish culture. I don't have to imitate crocodile culture. We're all animals, so then we should be able to do what other animals do. So if it tries to breathe underwater and get its oxygen the same way the fish does, it will drown because it's not living in harmony with its spirit genetic culture. Only white people pretend like culture is not important, it's just something made up. For us, culture comes directly from the Supreme Being and it's wired within us. The whites and offspring don't have culture because they're spirits of disorder. They're the cancerous cells in the body of humanity. So they don't have a culture, they are corruptions of a culture. So they don't have something that's wired in them. So they just try to move around and consume and destroy everything. So now let's go back to some details about how this was preserved. How was this Hoodoo Pantheon preserved? Yes, the numbers were from 1 to 11. Mut is typically spelled M-U-T or M-W-T in ancient Kemet. Oh, let me just go back real quick. We went through that quickly, but what you'll see is we published volume 1 of our book, volume 2 of the Akradin Abosom book. But on this page, you will see that we have an article, either a book or an article. We have a book on Awusi and Ajwa, but all 11 deities, we have an article on each one showing who they are in the Akan tradition, how they manifest in H. Kemet and so forth, their names in the Yoruba tradition and things like that, what their function in creation is, how they operate through the solar, lunar, planetary bodies. We have a detailed information about each one of these divinities. So, but tonight we just wanted to show that these deities exist, and this is the major Hoodoo pantheon. I want to touch on one thing cosmologically, and then we're going to jump back to the cultural preservation aspect of it. In the Akradin Abosom book, volume 1, when we're talking about the cosmology, just want to touch on that real quick before we move forward. So in Akradin Abosom volume 1, we're talking about some of the things we just talked about, but in more detail as far as the nature of these divinities and their relationships and so forth. But what we want to show specifically, in the Akan language, the term Nyame is a term for quote unquote God, the supreme being on the masculine side. Nyamewa is the term for goddess, the great mother. Nyame, Nyamewa, sometimes spelled with an O and so forth. Nyame, Nyamewa, but that is Nyame is Ame, and this is the deity Ame, the great father. Then Amewa is Amenet or Amenat. This is the great mother. So Amen and Amenet, the great father, great mother who comprise the supreme being. When you look at the earliest religious texts in the world, which are the pyramid texts, the Meru texts, you will find Amen and Amenet together in those earliest texts. So there's never been a time when there was just Amen, the great God. There's never a time when there was just Amenet, the great mother. There's always Amen and Amenet in complementary, harmonious balance. And they are the two halves of the divine whole. And because of that balance of male and female, you'll see that balance permeates all of creation. And we balance ourselves in the same way. So, what we were talking about earlier about culture and cosmology and reincarnation and so forth, when we look at on a microcosmic level and a macrocosmic level, Nyame is the great divine body. On a microcosmic level, that's like your body. An Afurakani man, African black man and so forth, that's like an emanation on a microcosmic level, a child of Amen. And the Afuraikaidi woman, African black woman, is an emanation or a cell, a child of the great mother Amenet. So on a microcosmic level, you're a representation of Amen and Amenet, Inyame and Inyamewa. So they are the great divine body. And then your body, if you're male, is like Amen. And if you're a woman, black only, of course, Amenet. Then you have the Abosom, the deities. They are the organs within the great divine body. They're the spirits that animate the suns, moons, stars, planets, black substance of space, and so forth. They regulate order in creation within the great divine body. On a microcosmic level, your organs, your liver and your spleen and your lungs and your heart and your brain and everything else, those are smaller bodies within you, the great body. When those smaller bodies regulate order within your body, they are serving you, the great body. They maintain you and your creative organism. So they are the smaller bodies, children of the great being, the great God and so forth, and they regulate order within your great being. Then you have Nipa, which are human beings, and that's akin to cells in your body. We are the cells, not just human beings though, human beings, Afurakani, African black human beings, Nipa, the Akan term for human beings as well as plant life, animal life, and mineral life. We are the cells that are within the great divine body of the supreme being. And as cells, we are children of larger bodies, which are the organs. So if your liver cell serves as parent organ, the liver. When it serves as parent organ, the liver is serving you, the supreme being, the great body at the same time. Heart cells are children of the heart deity, the heart Orisha, the heart Abosom. When they serve their parent deity, the heart Abosom, they're serving you, the great being, at the same time. The same thing with the pancreas cells and spleen cells and so forth. We, as Afurakani Afrikani people, and Afurakani African Black people only, not Asians, not Europeans, not pseudo-Native Americans, not white Arabs or Hindus or white Hispanics and so forth, only Black people wherever we exist in the world. We are the only cells in the human sphere that are children of the great supreme being. The whites and their offspring of non-Black individuals are the cancerous cells, the disfigured cells that have manifested temporarily in this great divine body, and the immune system will isolate them, destroy them, eradicate them, exterminate them, and force them out the body. Just like your body, full of naturally derived cells and so forth, but a small group become cancerous, they cause problems, but your immune system and lymphatic system isolate them, kill them, and force them out the body on a regular basis. But we are the cells within the human sphere. We're children of specific organs or deities. I'm a child of Dana Awusi, someone born on Tuesday. Benada is a child of the deity Benar Abena. Someone born on Fida or Friday is a child of the divinity Afia or Fi, and so forth. We're children of a parent divinity. When we serve that parent divinity, we're also serving Nyamewa Nyame at the same time. If we get outside of that, we become cancer-like and start causing problems within the body, within creation. But we have an ancestral religious practice to help us get back on track so we can live in harmony with other Afurakani Afrikani people, as well as plant life, animal life, and mineral life, and fulfill our function in creation. So that's the breakdown. And then throughout the entire body, you have the fluid system, intracellular fluid, interstitial fluid within the cells and so forth, the water system. That is akin to the ancestral realm that's within the great divine body. Cells die, they become part of the fluid system. Eventually they reconstitute themselves and take some of the fluid that becomes the major part of the cell, 70+% of the cell and so forth. And that water inside the body nourishes and rejuvenates and is a conductor of electricity and so forth. The fluid system is like the ancestral realm. So you have the great mother and great father supreme being, the deities, which are the organs, the cells, which are plant life, animal life, mineral life, and Afrikani human life. And then the water system within the body is the ancestral realm that we die, we transition, we go to the watery realm, we reconstitute ourselves and reborn back into the cellular world and so forth, live in the great divine body like that, and we go back and forth. So we have that structure. And every Afrikani group has their own terms for that structure, but operates on the same structure. What we say is before we are, when you transitioned as an elder or elderess a couple hundred years ago and you became an ancestor and ancestress and living in the ancestral realm with your great-great-great-grandparents and so forth, at some point, one of your great-great-great-great-great-granddaughters grew up in America and got married and so forth, and it was time to have children, copulated with her spouse, and drew your spirit into the womb, and then 40 weeks later, you were born. But before that happened, for our people, for Afrikani people only, African Black people only, our spirit, as represented by this great figure here, the spirit is drawn up to Nyame wa Nyame, and they direct one of the Akradin Bosom, one of the divinities of the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, to govern our head. And that divinity installs itself in the head region, as we showed in this little diagram. So in this diagram, we're showing that the divinity for this particular male ancestor, as an example, we said the deity of the planet, quote unquote, Mars, which is Benna in Akan, Ogun in Yoruba, Ogu in Vodun, Herubedet or Herubedat in ancient Kemet, the winged sun disk and so forth. Herubedat came Benna in Akan. So that's male spiritual force that governs hot metal and war and fire and the immune system and so forth, that divinity, Benna, as represented by that, his shrine, the planet Benna and so forth, so-called Mars. If in this particular example, Benna was to govern the head of the individual, then he directs one of his children to take up residence in the head region. Now this spirit has a soul, has a divinity that governs his spiritual head. He is a child of the deity Benna. So he becomes a Kwa Benna, a servant of the divinity Benna, meaning he's going to carry that fiery warrior type energy into the communal sphere, because we need some of that, just like we need engineers, we need agriculturalists, we need warriors and warrioresses. He's going to be the one. We need an immune system in the community, just like we need, the skeletal system, which is the engineering aspect. But we also need an immune system to defend ourselves. And those who are children of the immune system divinities, they're governed by that. So this particular spirit was assigned to the deity Benna. That spirit takes up residence in his head. That becomes the soul, the Kra, and so forth. And now that he's a spirit and has been given a soul by Nyame wa Nyame, the great mother, great father, now he's ready to be sent into the womb. And he's sucked into the womb, drawn into the womb, when his, descendants copulate and so forth. And then 40 weeks later, he's born into the world as a child. This great ancestor has returned as he's grown, because he was born on Benada Tuesday, because the deity Benna, Herubeda, Benna, made sure that he would be born on Benada Tuesday. Even if the mother had birth complications or she had a cesarean section and so forth, the baby is not going to be pulled out until Benada or Tuesday. They're going to make sure that the child comes out and takes his first breath on Tuesday, whether it's Tuesday morning or Tuesday night. Now for us, the day begins at sunrise, not midnight. So 12:30 a.m. is not Tuesday. Tuesday doesn't begin until the sun rises. And if the sun rises at 6 a.m., that's when Tuesday begins, and it ends at 5:59 a.m. the next day, which instead of 11:59 p.m. And so Benna makes sure that this child, this great ancestor, is born into the world. Now you have a great ancestor in the body of a small infant. As the people watch the child grow and develop and see his character and so forth, he begins to manifest those fiery tendencies, those sharp, focused, disciplined, but also fiery warrior type tendencies. And they know how to begin to rear this individual and what kind of energy he has, what kinds of behaviors he's going to engage in, the way he's going to react to certain things as compared to somebody who's born under a different divinity. You already have an idea of how to rear the child, what kind of discipline you'll use. Certain kinds of disciplinary tactics won't work on a Benna that they'll work on a Kwajo or Kojo or an Aju. So you have a blueprint already laid out before, the child grows and develops. So this great ancestor is now operating in the body of an infant, and we grow, develop, work with the child and so forth. And this is what's happening. And the same with any other one of the other divinities. This is the way it happens in the Akan tradition. Now, hold on one second. All right. So in that particular piece, we just wanted to show that. Now we want to get into how was this culture preserved, and this group of divinities, they govern all natural cycles in creation. The 7-day week is also connected to the chronobiological cycle called the circa-septon cycle. It's a circadian rhythm where certain biological changes happen with every 7 days and so forth. That natural circadian rhythm, that chronobiological cycle is tied through the 7 days of the week. They govern all natural cycles in creation and so forth. So how was that tradition preserved in the Hoodoo tradition? Every single Akan child, of course, comes into the world assigned to one of those divinities. We also are assigned to a specific patriclan divinity and a matriclan divinity. Before we get to that, in this book, we also mention linguistically and culturally and so forth. If you look at the term Akan, this is from the Akan dictionary, that's the name of the people and so forth. If you ask the Akan people, why do they call themselves Akan? Ekan, or Ekan means the first, the foremost, former place, rank, or time. First, previously, formerly, a component part of the first people who were created in the beginning. Kan also means to count, calculate, or reckon, the first people to use measurement, time, counting to establish patterns in creation, recognize patterns, and establish civilization. To count, to calculate, or reckon. And Kan also means clear, bright, illuminated, and so forth. The first people to receive the light or illumination of civilization or wisdom, but that comes through spirit possession. The deities are lighting, possessing, and illuminating the individual. So these are the definitions for Akan. Why do you call yourself Akan? Well, in our language, Kan means first, foremost, from the beginning. Kan means to count, to calculate, or reckon, the first people to engage in measurement, establish civilization. Kan, the first to receive the light or illumination of the spirits through spirit possession so we can operate in a harmonious way. And the reason we lay that out is because when you look in the language of ancient Kemet, Ekan meaning first, foremost, former place, rank, or time, former, previously. This is actually spelled K-H-N-T, and the Egyptologists in this particular dictionary would stick an E in between consonants if they didn't know the vowel placement. This is not Kant. Kent is Kant. And when you see Kant, before, former, previously, in advance, in the fore part, in the front. Same definition of Kan here, former place, former, previously, first, foremost, in the front. Kant means the same thing in ancient Kemet. The Kanitiu, Kantiu, the Nubians, the dwellers in the south, the first people, the foremost people. The inland folk, peoples or tribes from the interior, the people south of Kemet, the Kan people, the Kantiu, the Kan people. Kan, not Ken, but Kan, the front land, the first land, the land of the south. Kanti, the Nubian frontier, the land in the Sudan. So the people, the Nubians, the Nubitu also called themselves the Kan people, the Kantiu, the first, foremost from the beginning. Okani, of Akan descent. Akanfo is plural, Akan people. Okani is singular, and that Akani or Okani is Kanti, the people from the beginning. Then you have Kan, to count, number, reckon, tell. Counting, like counting calories, counting the number of days, the phases of the moon, the movement of the sun, how many days it's going to take for the sun to return to a certain position, how many days it's going to take for the moon to come to a certain position. Then we can determine when we pick herbs and so forth, when we plant crops, when the flood is going to come, when the child is going to be born and so forth, when certain medicines can be procured and so forth. Counting, calculation, reckoning, establishing patterns, replicating those patterns that you find in nature to establish civilization, to count, to calculate, to reckon. Then you have the term in Kemet, this tethered rope symbol. They used to use it as a TH, but in the Coptic dialect, you'll see this symbol is the K sound. So that's not Tanu, that's Kanu, to count, to reckon. The same word, Kan, meaning to count or reckon in our Akan language, is Kanu in the language of ancient Kemet, to count, to reckon. Because we're the same people who migrated from the east to the west, and the same people who ended up in North America. So in the Coptic late period dialect, this symbol is the K sound, and that's why it's Kanu and not Tanu. And the recent Egyptological dictionaries, they won't use the TH anymore. They'll use an H with a symbol under it to represent the K sound and so forth. So once again, you have the tethered rope symbol, that's Kanu. The Libyans was those Nubians living west of Kemet in what is now Libya. Those are the Western Nubians, and the ones in the south where the Sudan is now is the Southern Nubians. But the Southern Nubians were called Kanti, Kantiu, the people in the south in the Sudan. The Western Nubians were called not Thanu, but Kanu, the Libyans. And you'll see Kan, clear, bright, light, luminous. It's not than, but kahan, to scintillate, to glitter, to shine, lightning, stone, crystal, any brightest sparkling substance. So clear, bright, shining, luminous, kan, and so forth. So you have kan, to count, number, reckon, kanu, to count, to reckon, akani, a man of Akan descent, kanu, the Libyans, the Western Nubians, and so forth, kanti, the Southern Nubians. Then you have Tennu, but it's really Kanu, Libya, and so forth. So we showed that to show that the three definitions that define what Akan people are: the first people, the people who first to count, calculate, reckon, establish civilization, the first to receive the light of illumination, and so forth. Those same definitions define the Nubian people as Kan, first and foremost, Kan, to count, calculate, reckon, Kan, to receive the light of illumination. So we never stop speaking the same language or practicing the same tradition. And what we also show in this book is that the various names of the divinities that you find in ancient Sumer for the sun, moon, and planets, and so forth, those same descriptive titles you will find in the language of ancient Kemet. So they're not Babylonian, they're not Sumerian. You find the exact same names, the Utu and Nana and Sin and Nergal and Gu and Inanna and Nin Urta and all that, and Kajamanu and so forth. You find those descriptive titles in the language of Kemet, pre-Sumer, but you'll also find them as descriptive titles in the Akan language, meaning we carried this 7-day week from northern Afrika in the regions of Libya, northern Kemet, migrated into the Near East, carried that 7-day week into Sumer, continued to practice the 7-day week. The Eurasians invaded Sumer later. It later became the Babylonian Empire and so forth, and eventually the Assyrians and so forth. And they continued the 7-day week, and they gave it to other Europeans. But we established that in ancient Afrika before the Europeans existed on Earth. Now, and then I want to touch on this portion, and then we'll answer some questions in the chat room. I want to get to this portion right here. So we talked about the Abosom. Now, if we know, and we do, of course, that every time you see Akan people with day names, quote unquote day names, Dadin, day names, but they're really Kradin, soul names, Kwesi, Akosuya, Kwame, Ama, Kofi, Afua, Kwabena, Abena, Kwajo, or Kojo, or Kujo, and Ajowa, and Kweku, and Akua, and Yao, and Ya, and Abba, and Kwao, and so forth, and the different variations. Because people simply called them day names, because they didn't understand what they were, they just assumed, well, oh, this is just what Akan people do. We just showed you that those day names are every one of those names are names of deities. Kwa Bena is a servant of the deity Bena. A Bena for a woman is a servant of the divinity Abena, which is Sekhmet. Kwame is a servant of the deity Ame, and Amma is the same, so forth, the divinity Heteru, who is called Menmenet, and so forth. So it indicates that we're a child of a specific divinity. We cleanse our spiritual head, our soul. The deity that governs our head is called our soul, our Kra, the soul, the divinity that governs the head, our spiritual head, on the day of the divinity that we're born under. So on Sundays, our Wusida, I go to the shrine that I've established for the divinity that governs my head to cleanse my spiritual head and so forth, and commune with that divinity on his sacred day. If a woman is born on Akuada, which is Wednesday, she's a child of the female divinity Akua, Nana Akua. She will go cleanse her head, her spiritual head, her soul on Akuada on Wednesday at the shrine for the divinity Akua and so forth, to realign herself with that divinity. So we have specific things that we do. And it's the same thing for the patriclan and matriclan divinities, but the name that you're associated with is directly related to the deity that governs your head and your function in creation. It's a religious name. It points to a specific religious practice that's associated with your function in creation. It's tied to the very reason that you are on earth. So when we understand that, let's look at what some people have talked about. We just showed you the Akan, specific names and so forth, but let's look at a second. Okay, so if you were to Google Akan day names, and this is where people get things mixed up. Looking Wikipedia and so forth, they would talk about similar things. You see the day, Sunday through Saturday and so forth. And you'll see Kwesi and Akosua and Esi, Akwajo, Adwa, and the different variations of these different names. And a number of different variants, Sisi and Kwesi and Kwasi and Akosi and Akosiwa, and a number of different names. So now, then they show some of the variants in the Caribbean. So you have Kojo, Ajuba. So instead of Ajowa, there's certain variants like in the Fanti dialects, Ajoba, and that was carried by the Njuka people in South America, and they still say Ajuba. So whereas in America, you may say Ajua, they'll say Ajuba. They'll say Abeni instead of Abena. They would say Kwashie, if you look, for example, in Jamaica. Instead of saying Kwasi, they'll say Kwashi. Same thing in Guyana. They'll say Kwashi or Kwashie instead of Kwasi or Akwesi and so forth. Instead of Ajowa, they'll say Ajoba because Ba is a feminine suffix in Akan. Sometimes it's Ba, sometimes it's Wa, sometimes it's A, depending on dialect. So some will say Ajowa, some will say Ajoba, and so forth. Akua, some will say Akuba, because Ba is the feminine suffix again. That's a variation. Akua, Ekua, Kukua, Akuba instead of Akua, and they'll spell it differently. Kwaku, Kweku, as well as Kwaku, different ways. Kwao, as well as Yao, Aba, Yaba. You'll see in Jamaica, they'll spell it Kufi or Kufi, that's Kofi, but they'll spell it C-U-F-F-E-E and so forth. Instead of Afia, they'll say Afiba, or just Fiba and so forth. Kwame, Kwamena, and so forth. So you see the different variations in Jamaica. People are used to seeing that. In South America, amongst the Akan and Suriname, who maintain Akan tradition and the 7 days of the week and the deities of the 7 days, and they worship the deities of the 7 days, and they're named after them, and they have all of these names and so forth. And that proves that they're practicing that tradition. In Jamaica, for people who know, they still understand that, but some just have the day names and don't even know that they're connected to deities. You have many Ghanaians who became Christianized, and they're at this point, they come in contact with our work or other individuals, and they never knew growing up that the reason why they're Kwabena and Abena and Kodra and so forth is because they're named after deities. They thought that they were just named after the days because of Christian or Islamic corruption and perversion of these fake religions on their culture. Now they have to relearn their culture, and they're relearning it from our website. So you'll see that. But one thing that's not well attested and not understood at all is that, of course, we maintain these same names in North America. So we don't have to go to Ghana, we don't have to go to Jamaica or Suriname or Guyana and so forth to get our culture. We maintain that in North America. Now, well, first, let's look at this. Africanisms and African-American names in the United States. They talk about how the master's name, last name, so-called master's name was used and so forth, which we know that. By 1734, when the South Carolina Gazette was established, names of African origin included Bobao, Cuffy, which is Kofi, Ebo, which is the praise name for Kwabena, as we show in our chart, Joe, which is the praise name for Kwajo and Jojo and so forth, Ganda, Kwaku, which is Kwaku, which is Kweku, Kwaminor, which is Kwamina, Saturday born, Kwoi, which is Kwao. So they said for males, and then they said African for males, Africans, and Auba, which is Abba, Thursday born, Juba, which is Ajuba, Monday born, Mimba, Odan, Ota for females. African names, that's in the 1700s. The South Carolina Gazette. African names common in the 18th century was Sambo, Kwash, which is Kwashi, which is Kwesi, Mingo, that comes from, you know, Mali and so forth, Mindi speaking, Juba, which is Ajuba, and so forth. They said the most widely used day names were Kufi, which is Kofi, and Kujo, which is Kojo, Monday born for males, and Abba, which is a Thursday born woman, and Juba, which is a Monday born woman, Ajuba, for females. So the South Carolina Gazette is just one example. You see like Abena, Kwabena, and so forth. But according to Cohen, African day names and their English counterparts existed side by side. Two male slaves named Friday, one of them this country born and the other from the Angola country, and two male slaves named Monday, one from Bambara, which they said Bambara, and the other a barbarian Negro, quote unquote, are mentioned in the Gazette. Blanche Britt supplied Mencken with this list of African names taken from Southern newspapers from 1736 to the end of the 18th century. And of course, it wasn't just Akan people, but of course, we're talking about Akan, but you have Anika, Bohum, Bumi, Bozar, but you have Kufi, which is a version of Kofi, another Kufi, Kofi, Habela, Kwachi, which is Kwashi, which is Kwesi. Then you have Mila, Minas, Monimia, Kwa, and Kwao, that's Thursday born male, Kwao, Kwaku, which is Kweku, also pronounced Kwaku, or Wednesday born, Kwamena, which is Kwamena, a Saturday born male, Kwame, Kwash, which is Kwashi, that's Kwesi, and so forth. Just another example. Then you have Cohen gives a list of African names found in the Gazette between 1732 and 1775. A list of slave names from a 1656 land patent record suggests that these slaves came from the Bight of Guinea to Virginia on a Dutch ship, the Wick Part and so forth by way of New Netherlands. The Virginia importer was Edmund Scarborough, and so forth. The names are given in table 2. So you look at this first table, some of the male names, different names, Anki, Asaro, Asi, and so forth. But when you get to certain names like Kwamania, Kwamani, that's Kwamina, that is a male, that's a Kwame, that's a male born on Saturday, a child of the deity Amen, Kwame. Then you have Kwao, one born on Thursday, Yauda, a child of the deity Yao, or Kwao, and so forth. Kwash, which is Kwashi or Kwasi, that's one born on Sunday, or Kwasida. Kwao, which is Thursday once again. And just to switch back real quick. When we talk about the praise names, you have Akoswea and Kwesi and so forth, but the praise names, for example, we said Kwabena, also Ko-Bena, but he's called Ojam. That's a praise name for Kwabena, the fiery one, carries the fire within. Ogufo, the one who casts metal, Ogufo. and Akan, same as Ogun and Yoruba, but Akan, Yoruba people in the western part of the continent share many terms because we're related. Ebo, we just saw Ebo, meaning metal and so forth. He's a deity of hot metal, war, fire, and so forth. So when you see Ebo, that's a praise name for a Kwabena. They call him Kwabena, they also call him Ebo. You see a Kojo, they can call him Okoto, which is the sacred crab and so forth. Asere, woman is a Kotowa, Adai, and so forth. So these are different praise names. When you see the name for Yauda Thursday, the deity is Yao, but you also see Kwao and also Ko, depending on the dialect. So these are the different names. You see Afiba, instead of Afia, it's Afiba. You have Abba, Thursday for a female. You also have Ajoa, Ajo, Ejo, sometimes just Joe. Like if somebody's named Joanne and they call her Joe, but somebody's named Ajoa and they call her Joe or Jojo, you'll see Ejo or just Joe. You also have Ajoba, instead of Ajowa, Ajoba. And this is where you get Ajuba and Juba, and then later just Juba. We'll say Juba instead of Juba. We'll say, instead of Ghana, we'll say Ghana with an NUH because we're accustomed to pronouncing A or AH as in English because we're not accustomed to our own languages. So if someone says, I'm from Ghana, we'll turn right around and say, he's from Ghana. We'll say Ghana. He'll say, my name is Nana Kofi. We'll say his name is Nana Kofi, Nana Kofi, because we're so used to dropping the I, making it an because we learned that in English. But Ajowa became Ajoba, and then later Joba, and now it's Juba. But it's really Juba, Joba. The same thing when we talk about Moja, it's a term for blood, and also the blood talisman, and that became Moja, and later Mojo. Same thing. All right. So when you look at these different names, there are people from, and this is a list from, a number of different names, different groups that were all brought together, but what you'll end up finding you have Kwaku. They're trying to use English to spell these terms and so forth. So Kwaku, which is Kweku or Kwaku, Kwameno, which is Kwamena and so forth. Kuf, which is Kofi, a different Kofi. Kujo, which is Kojo or Kwajo. And then when you look through these terms, you'll find, people from different, male and female names from different ethnic groups and so forth. But you'll continuously find, these Akan people who were forced over here. The Akan ethnic group is about 26 million plus Akan people. It's one of the largest ethnic groups on the continent of Africa, one of the largest in the western part of the continent, and therefore one of the largest from which our people were taken. It was the Akan, the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Ebe, the, Bakongo, the Ovambo, Gola, Kisi, Mende, including Bambara and so forth. There's a certain number of groups where a large percentage of our people were taken from. And then you have a number of smaller ethnic groups as well, like the Basa. Fula is a large ethnic group, but, Ibibio or Chokwe or Lobi, a number of small ethnic groups as well. But some of these large ethnic groups, many of our people, the majority of our people were taken from. And this is why these cultures resonate with people in North America now, because we are the same people who were snatched up and taken, waged war against the whites and their offspring, died in these wars and so forth. Our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren and great-great-great-grandchildren and so forth, growing and developing in America generation after generation. Then at some point, one of our great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren grows up and gets married and want time to draw an ancestral spirit back into the womb, and then they draw our spirit back for the first time in 200 plus years. And we who used to live on the continent and spoke that language and practiced that culture and worshiped that specific divinity in a specific way, We've been drawn back into the world. We grew up in America. And as soon as we come across on the internet or somebody or some element from our ancestral culture that we used to practice when we lived on the continent, we're drawn to that because we know that's our culture. But even within North America, when you see people talking about, hey, I'm going to name my child Jojo, I'm going to name my child Abby or Abeni, I'm going to name my child Sisi, I'm going to name my child Fi or Fifi and so forth. These are all praise names of these Akradin of soul names. So when you see somebody, it used to be where African-American intellectuals would say the Akan people's culture was preserved through their day names. And they'll go right to the South Carolina Gazette. And they'll, for example, Bena, this is an advertisement, ran away from me, the subscriber, a Negro woman named Bena. Whoever will return said Negro to me shall have $5 reward, and those who harbor her may depend on being prosecuted. Isaac Eliezer and so forth. So a sister named Abena ran away, and they're trying to get her back, and they put the ad in the paper to try to get her back, and you'll get compensated to bring her back. So African-American intellectuals will say, well, the Akan people's culture was preserved through their names. They'll go to the South Carolina Gazette, as well as many other records, and show all over Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, wherever our people were enslaved. You'll see a large percentage of them. You'll see Kofi and Adjoa and Abbas and Kwashis and so forth. That Akan presence was very powerful. What they didn't know was that Akan name or Kradin or so-called day name was really a soul name, and it was pointing to the fact that these people were worshiping those deities. If it was Benna, Abena, and so forth, when she was escaping, when she went out to the forest, she worshiped the deity Abena, who's called Sekhmet in ancient Kemet. She's also called Sechima or Sechimet in Akan culture as well. So they were actually worshiping those deities. If you have a Kradin, a day name, that means you're also worshiping that divinity. That means you're part of a religious structure. You knew what your ancestral religion was. You weren't just named after a day of the week. Black people in America who know nothing about the culture, all they could assume was, oh, they're just named after the day of the week. They would have no idea if they're brainwashed with white culture and never stepped outside of Christianity or Islam or Judaism and so forth to return to their own traditions. They would have no idea that that Kradin, that soul name, meant this person is a child of a specific deity, male or female deity, and this is the divinity they worship and communicate with to bring their energy into the world. And that deity is related in a specific way to these other 10 deities that govern the soul, the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies. It is part of a system called the Akradin Bosom. That is the major hoodoo pantheon that every single Akan person born in North America is tied to. People who claim to practice Undu, which is the Akan word hoodoo, who know nothing about the deities and talk about, well, there are no deities in hoodoo. As you can see, that's insane. That's absurd. How are you practicing an ancestral religion and you don't even know the deities exist, but you claim to be practicing an ancestral religion? Ancestral religion is about aligning with the great mother and great father, supreme being, through the agency of the deity that governs your head and your ancestresses and ancestors of your spirigenetic patriclan and matriclan blood circles. That is how we align with the supreme being, through the ancestral blood circles and the divinity that governs our head. That distinguishes us from any other individual or any other group, because we all have our unique approach based on the way we're structured. Just like liver cells don't try to jump and become spleen cells because they're like, well, we're all body cells, so we can just do whatever we want to. If they tried to do that, they would die. They have to operate within the culture and the divinity that they are born of. They have to operate within their parent deity, the liver, so they can serve the great supreme being at the same time. We're wired to operate within our patriclan and matriclan culture, ancestral culture, and the divinity that was assigned to our very head region, the reason we're in the world, in order to align with the supreme being. So we have an inborn culture that comes into the world and incarnates with us. So if you're practicing authentic hoodoo, you know the deity that governs your head, you know the deity that governs the patriclan and matriclan, which we talked a little bit about in some of the other broadcasts, so we didn't get into that here. And you know your Akan identity. If you don't know that, you're not practicing hoodoo. Just dealing with roots and herbs. All tradition deal with roots and herbs, every one. That is not unique to the hoodoo tradition. Every single Afro-Akani Afrikani tradition of all 2 billion plus Afro-Akani Afrikani people on earth have roots and herbs that they deal with. It is the manner in which we approach that based on the deity that governs our head and our matriclan and patriclan in a unique configuration that makes us Akan, and our experience through generations of operating within this blood circle through generation after generation, intergenerationally and transcarnationally. All right. So just to put a cap on that, and then we'll answer some questions. We were showing this, let me just switch it over real quick. Okay, so when we show the dictionary of the Asante and Fanti language called Tree, and of course, you know, as we've shown, we can take any entry in this dictionary, compare it to the language of ancient Kemet and find the same words, the same meanings, and the same deities with the same functions and so forth. They didn't know anything about that when they were publishing this in the early 1850s, when they were sitting with our people in the forest in Ghana. They didn't know anything about hieroglyphs, you know, in ancient Kemet. So we can take a hieroglyphic dictionary, take the Asante Fanti dictionary that was published in the 1850s before they knew anything about hieroglyphs, and we can have the same words, same meanings, same definitions, same deities, same sacred colors, same functions in creation that you find in ancient Kemet, that you find in the forest in the Ghana and Ivory Coast, and that you find in the hoodoo tradition in North America, as laid out and proven in the South Carolina Gazette. If someone is called Kufi or Kufi or Kofi and so forth, that doesn't just mean he was born on a Friday. That means he's a child of the deity Fi, and he worships that divinity. Now, they started working on this in the 1850s. So now when we switch over, in the appendix, and remember it's the 1850s, so of course the language they use is silly sometimes. So when they say names for God of the Supreme Being, and they say Obuade and Bode Bode and all of that, and Nyame and Yonkumpon and so forth, then they say names of Abosom. In other words, the gods, deities, jinni, demons, guardian spirits, because they were, you know, quote unquote Christians, they will look at the spirits, the deities that we were talking about, we were getting possessed by and worship, and they would try to call them demons or jinni coming from the, you know, from Greek genius, jinni, but then also the jinn and in Arabic and so forth, trying to say it's a negative spirit and so forth, because they didn't want us to talk about the real thing. They wanted to pretend like we were doing something else. So, and he says the appellation fetish from the Portuguese fetico, artificial, amulet, charm, sorcery, and all of that. So, but the term Abosom, they'll use the term gods, deities, jinni, demons, guardian spirits, or spirits created by God, subordinate to him and executing his will with regard to man. So that's the way they're defining it, because they're sitting with the people. They're saying we get possessed by these spirits. They operate through the sun, moon, planet, earth, mother, oceans, rivers, streams. They're the children of Nyame and Nyamewa, and they govern all of creation, and we're children of them. So he talks about Abosom, then Obaino Abosom, the town or country deities, the Abusi Abosom, the family or matriclan divinities. Then lists a number of deities in that region, which is down here. But here's the other important piece. Names of personal beings referring to the 7 days of the week. This is written in the 1850s. The 7 days of the week are named after 7 personal beings or jinni, which of course is saying deities, called, which we just saw in our chart, Ayisi, which is Awusi, Ajo, Benna, Wuku, Yao, Afi, Amen. The names of the days are Kwesida, which is also Awusida Sunday, Joda Monday, Benada Tuesday, Wukuda Wednesday, Yauda Thursday, Fida Friday, Minida Saturday. And of course, there are dialectical variants. He was in one particular region. Every boy receives a name from the day on which he is born. The syllable kwa equals akwa, a man slave being prefixed to one of those 7 personal names, kwa si, kwa jo, kwa bena, as we just saw, kwao, or only yao, kofi, kwa me. And he says, thus the name Kwesi means a man belonging to the deity Ayisi, just as Kwadade is a name given to one before at his birth, dedicated to the Abosom, or the deity Adade, or as Kwajeman is the name of a slave belonging to a man called Ajeman and so forth. But Kwa means the servant of one. There's a deity called Adade. If you're Kwa Dade, you're a servant of the deity Dade. If you're Kwa Asi, you're a servant of Asi. If you're Kwa Me, you're a servant of the divinity, as we said. And they talk about how people salute the person. If one is called Kwesi or Kwajo and salutes a person knowing him by this name, that the other person replies, Ya, which means yes, Ayisi, Ya Ajo. So if somebody knows the culture and I say, Medinde Kwesi, or I am Kwesi, my name is Kwesi, the person would say, yes, Kwesi, but they would say, Ya Ayisi. They would say, yes, and then they will call them my Abosom, Ayisi, or Awusi, the divinity. If it was Afi, Kofi, or Afia, or Afua, female, if a woman said, my name is Afua, then I would say, Ya Afi, meaning yes to the divinity Afi that governs her head. I'm literally invoking the deity that governs her head. As soon as she says her name, I know what deity governs her head, so I respond to that divinity that's governing her head. Same thing with Ajo, Abena, and so forth. Then it says the corresponding female names are Akosua, also Akwasiba, Ajoa, Abena, Akwa, Ya, also Yawa, Afua, which is also Afia, Ama. Now, such a male or female name is called the name of that person's Akra, the soul, and it says, or soul, Wakra ne Kwesi. Your Kra is Kwesi. The soul, that spirit, is a deity itself that comes and dwells with you. An individual coming to take up residence in your head region, that divinity, male or female, represents the supreme being. So that's just like if you had a person who was your supervisor and they came to sit in the car with you and drive somewhere, and you were driving and you stopped the car and somebody you know saw you and talked to you and spoke to your supervisor and so forth, who's watching over you. That's what the soul is. In Afrikani culture, in real culture, the soul is actually a deity. It's a male deity if you're male, a female divinity if you're female, a deity that dwells with you and guides you throughout the course of your life. And when you finish living in the world and so forth, that deity will go back to Inyamewa Inyame and report on what you've done throughout the course of your life. It is a separate individual entity that dwells with you. And because that divinity dwells with you, then you can say that is my soul. That is my Kra, if you're male, or my Krawa if you're female. Same in Yoruba with the Ori Inu, the inner Ori, the inner head and so forth. That is the personal Orisha or divinity that governs the person. And Akan is the Akra, the personal Abosom that governs the person. So when they say, Wakra ne Kwesi, my Kra, my soul's name, his name is Kwesi, but since he dwells within me, people can call me Kwesi as well. But my name is Rad Nehem Pata Akan. So when you hear me say, I am Kwesi, Rad Nehem Pata Akan, my name is Rad Nehem Pata Akan, the deity that governs my head, his name is Kwesi, but since he dwells within me, you can call me Kwesi as well. But when I say Medinde Kwesi, or Yefremi Kwesi, they call me Kwesi and so forth. Someone who knows the culture would say Ya Awusi, they will speak directly to the divinity that governs my head in a way to stimulate my spirit to align with my function. So this is why he says, but Okra, meaning the soul in the head region, is sometimes spoken of as if it were a personal being distinguished from the man himself, which is true. So that one who has attained to wealthy circumstances ascribes it to the favor of his Kra, his soul, and brings thank offerings to his own soul. That was foreign to them because they thought soul and spirit was the same thing, and your soul was just your spirit, the energy that animates you, and you're just a spirit animating a body. And when you die, your spirit leaves your body, and you're just a spirit in a physical body. You are a spirit in a physical body. You are a sum, a spirit in a physical body. But just like we showed in the book, the little gray spirit, but then the radiant force, you're a spirit, and then you have a divinity that's assigned to dwell with you. You're a quote unquote supervisor that walks with you throughout your life. That is your Kra, your soul, a male divinity if you're male, a female divinity if you're female. And it's called Akan Ancestral Religion. And let's just switch over real quick. We're not going to get into it too heavily, but just so you know, you'll see this on our website. Our book, the Okra Complex, the Soul of Akanfo. This entire book is about the nature of the soul, the deity that governs your head. And we show how it manifests in the Akan tradition, but we also prove it's the same, deity that you find as Ka in ancient Kemet. So we prove that, but then we go into detail about the soul, your divine function, how that's wired in your spiritual head and so forth. We talk about, the unfolding of creation, the black substance of space. And once again, these are the luminous entities, the mineral life in the black substance of space, just like you have mineral life in the black soil and so forth. But we break down the cosmology and linguistics, but then we get into the second half of the book. We get into the divine function of the person. We show the complex, just akin to the brain. The brain is like the shrine for that deity. That's the seat of that deity. If you put a throne out and somebody sat down, your brain is the throne of the shrine, and that deity sits there, dwells in there. And we show the complex of the Nkra and Nkravia, She and Shavia, the different aspects of your divine function. What you are to execute in the world, how you are to execute that divine function, what energetic capacities or spiritual potencies you've been given, whether you've given fire energy or water energy or whatever it is, and then the specific manner in which to wield that energy to execute your function. That is the Okra complex. So we go into detail about that in that book. But the key with regard to this piece here, and one of the reasons we showed this, book written in the 1850s and so forth, like we said earlier, if they're sitting in the 1850s talking to our people, talking to our ancestresses and ancestors and asking questions about what's going on, and just to give you an example of how that would work, they'll ask them, what does this mean? What word is this? What is, just giving definitions, compiling a dictionary. If you went to another country and you want to compile a dictionary, you'll ask them, how do you say this? How do you say water in your language? How do you say dog in your language? How do you say, and they would compile that plus learning the language. In this particular dictionary, that's what they're doing, but they also have, you'll see certain things that are in parentheses. It represents that the person decided to give some more context. So they will put that in parentheses just so people could have a better understanding. So for example, a samine, a departed spirit, samine fo is the ancestral spirits and so forth. And this section right here, they'll give you the definition, but then it says when a man dies, he goes into the world of the spirits, the asamai. And then it says, Wose, asamai waho yi, ahini waho, nkwa waho. So they start, the person that he's talking to says all of this, and then he writes it in tree, and then he gives the English translation. So one of our ancestors was sitting there. He asked him, what does the word asamai mean? Well, this is the land of the ancestral spirits, the land of the asamai. And then he gives some detail. He says, in the realm of the dead, there are kings as well as subjects, slaves. If you were subjects, English, they're putting slaves, but it means subjects, of the nation. If you were sick in this world for a long time, you will be restored to health there after 3 years. But one who died in battle or by accident will be well again in a short time, perhaps in a month or so. It is said, the realm of the dead is below in the earth. Some say it is above in heaven. About this, there is no surety. Where one is taken to when he dies, there his spirit is. When you die and they take you to the spirit's grove, then your spirit is in the grove. The town or country of the departed spirits is not in the grove, but in the earth. It is a large town, city a long way off. And in going there, a mountain has to be ascended. The way of one who died, a common death is dark in heaven. But if one who died in battle or by accident takes that way, some of the white clay with which he is rubbed drops down, therefore his way, the Milky Way, appears white. In the spirit's grove, the departed spirits do not stay always. Only on certain single days they come and assemble there for drinking or eating or playing. So he's sitting there with an elder, and the elder is telling him, well, when you say asaman in the world of the spirits, let me give you some context. This is the 1850s. So if there was an elder who was like 90, he was born in 1760, so-called 1760, and he's talking about his culture, talking about the way the people operate. If he's living in 1760, or he was born in 1760, that means his parents were born in like the 1740s, or his grandparents the 1720s or early 1700s and so forth. And he's talking about the culture he learned from them and the culture that they practiced. And then when he sits and tells him there are 7 days of the week, and there are male and female deities, Abosom, that govern the 7 days of the week, and we're named after them. When we tell somebody our name, they invoke the deity that governs our head. And we have Okragwade, where we wash our head, the soul washing ceremony to communicate with that deity that governs the day of the week we were born on and so forth. This is what they're talking about. And he's talking about that culture he learned from his grandparents who were born in the early 1700s. And some of those people that he learned from, his grandparents and great uncles and great aunts who were born in the early 1700s, some of them were taken from there and forced into North America. And they ended up in the South Carolina Gazette as Kofi and Ama and Afua and Kweku and Kwesi and Ajoa and Kwabena and Abena and Akua and so forth. And they continued to communicate with the deity that governs their head. They knew about the other divinities as well. They dealt with the deities and invoked the deities of their matric clans and patric clans. They invoked or evoked their Nsamanfo, their spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, the Nananoma Nsamanfo, and they continued Akan Ancestral Religion all the way down to the present day, which is the the Hoodoo tradition. And we have the Hoodoo spirits, and the Hoodoo Pantheon are these divinities. And then when you look back in your families, going back to my great-grandmother born in 1899, didn't transition until I was about to go to high school, so I knew her and so forth. And just like I could communicate with somebody who was born in 1899, when she was young, she could communicate with her great-grandmother who would have been born in the early 1800s or late 1700s and so forth, and they passed that culture down. So when you look at the names and nicknames of people in your family, and they're Jojo, or Benny, which is Abeni, Jojo, which is Kwajoa, Ajoa, or Koko, which is Kwaku and so forth, or Kosia and so forth, or if they're many men, which is men, which is Kwamen and so forth, or Kwamena, you'll find that their praise names happen to be soul names. They were instinctively giving their children these soul names so they can invoke these divinities. And if they were practicing authentic hoodoo, they continued to do that. Or they simply said, the hoodoo spirit that governs my head. If they forgot the name, they would communicate with that spirit. That spirit would possess them, teach them how to procure medicine, heal, possess, lay hands, and so forth. We have a hoodoo pantheon, unbroken, never lost. This term Abosommagua, the term Ba, Gua, Gua is the marketplace and so forth. It's the place where people convene to conduct business and so forth. Ba, Gua means to go, Ba, and engage. The Agua, the marketplace, you convene together. The Abosommagua is when the divinities all come together as a council and so forth that is in the form of a pantheon, and this is why we utilize that terminology, the Abosommagua, the great council or convent or convening of the various divinities. That's what we're talking about. But the Akradin Bosom is the major hoodoo pantheon. They govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7-day week. And as we say on our page, switch over right here. The Akradin Bosom not only have the shrines in the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, but they also have Abosom Komre, Abosom shrines within Asasiafu, the Earth Mother, including Earth's core, the Black Earth, rivers, the ionosphere, the rainwaters, the red earth, the wind, thunder and lightning, magnetosphere, and the sky and the polar regions axis. And if you look at those 11, items right there, they're in alignment with those 11 male and female divinities. And then we say they're also associated with the certain organs and organ systems that govern our physical bodies and so forth. So on every aspect of creation, stellar, solar, lunar, planetary, your physical body, and the divisions of your spirit, these different divinities manifest. This is the major hoodoo pantheon that has always existed, as proven by the Akradin, the soul names that we bear. All right. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover. I'm going to look, if you have any questions, of course, we can answer them in the chat room. Okay, so one question was the numbers that we just put forward. Are those the numbers? This is what the person is talking about. So you see these numbers, Eko and Enu and Essa and Nine and Noon, Ensia, Nson, Awochwe, Nkron, Edu, Duko. These are the numbers from 1 to 11 that are the sacred numbers of these divinities. And that is different from, in large part, than the pseudo-numerology that you find born of the Kabbalah and so forth, because they were corrupting the names and functions of divinities and so forth. When you look at the so-called Kabbalah and the Tree of Life and the Sephiroth and all of that, when you look at the Paut Toru, the company of the divinities in ancient Kemet, this is where they got that from, but they, of course, corrupted that, corrupted the names and functions of actual deities in creation, including these, into little angels, fictional angels and so forth, false equivalencies and so forth, misinformation with regard to cosmology. So people are running around talking about the Kabbalah thinking that's something deep, and it's not deep at all. It's full of misinformation. So all right, so that was the first question on top. There's a question, are muscle spasms getting heavy with the spirit? That can take place, not every time, but sometimes that does take place. We also mentioned in our broadcast when we're doing the Hoodoo Mind Festival, this notion of sleep paralysis. When someone is asleep and, they talk about a spirit riding you or witch riding you and so forth, and it causes you to be not being able to move your arms or legs or open your mouth and so forth. Sometimes it can have something to do with sleep paralysis, but depending on what's going on, it can be a spirit. We talked about this in detail in the Hoodoo Mind Festival broadcast, which you can watch that on our page. Sometimes it is a negative spirit trying to control the individual, but sometimes it can be the spirit of an Abosom, a divinity, or one of the Nsamanfo, indicating to the individual that it's time for them to engage in some form of ritual work. Sometimes it has to do with initiation, sometimes it has to do with ritual work that's either not being done, being neglected, or needing to be done. And sometimes a muscle spasm will be associated with that, but not just muscle spasms in and of themselves. You have to check and see what's actually going on. And you don't really want to say, when you hear people say, if this happens, then it's just that. Sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. And very often people don't know these different nuances, so they just try to simplify things and say, for example, we saw somebody talking about ancestral tradition and pouring libation and setting up a shrine, and they said, well, if you put water in the bowl and there are a bunch of bubbles in the water, that means the ancestral spirits are there. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it has to do with condensation or the temperature in the room, and it has nothing to do with that. Or sometimes when the candles are burning and they're black soot on the side of the candles, sometimes something is going on, but sometimes it's not that. It depends on what kind of candles you're dealing with. When people are actually communicating with the Nsamanfo and the Abosom, that they can discern the difference between what's happening. You don't just want to have knee-jerk responses, automatic responses. It has to be based on experience. And ultimately, you need to check what anybody else is saying. People can talk all day long. You can hear me talk all day long about these deities and everything else, but you have to go and sit down, because it's your responsibility as an adult to deal with the divinity that governs your own head and the Nsamanfo, your ancestral spirits that are connected to your blood circle, to confirm what I say or anybody else says, not because you're trying to confirm it for me, but you need to confirm what you need to know what's true. If we talk about something, then your Nsamanfo should be able to confirm that, and they will be able to confirm that. But you don't just depend on what somebody else says. Ultimately, you're going to have to make a decision about everything you do in life, so you need to confirm that with your own Kra, the divinity that governs your head, as well as your Nsamanfo, your ancestral spirits as well. Okay, we asked about moot. Okay, so rebuilding our relationship with the divinities. And then the next question was also, how does one know who their head deity is? Do we have to have a shrine for our specific divinity that governs our head and so forth? So those questions are related. Let me just show you. Okay, so, because that's very detailed information. So if you look at our Akongwa Suya page, this is the page where we've listed we have 34 online courses. Some of them were 6 weeks, some of them were 4 weeks, a couple of them were 7 weeks and so forth. They're all archived, so you can have access to them. They're 50% off. So all of the 6-week courses, they originally were $30, now they are $15. Those 4-week courses were originally $20, now they're $10. So you will see, for example, this is just a collage of all of them. But when you scroll through, you'll see the flyers, the original flyers for each course, but you'll also see under each one, you'll see it says archived course. Because it's archived, it's 50% off and so forth. So you'll see the flyer for each one. And when you go under the flyer, you can purchase the course, and we'll send you the information for it so you can access it. One of them that addresses those questions you just asked is the Nkom course. Well, actually, two of them. Now, Nkom, the 4 elemental rituals of spirit communication, practical instruction. libation, which is Oshuye, establishing an ancestral shrine, which is Nkomre, Susuho, which is meditation, Okragware, which is the soul washing, head washing ritual, and so forth. Every ancestral tradition has a form of those 4 basic rituals. We said elemental rituals because it's Asase, which is earth, and Mmusuo, which is water, and Mframa, which is air, and Oja, which is fire. But every tradition of our people deals with these elemental forces and deals with these 4 basic ritual practices: libation, ancestral shrines, meditation, spiritual head cleansing, and so forth. And we deal with practical instruction. And through that process, you can learn who your ancestresses and ancestors are, the spiritually cultivated ones, what clan you come from, therefore what tradition you should practice, what language you can start learning about, and so forth, the divinity that governs your head, these different things. So these 4 basic rituals, no matter what tradition you come from, all of us have some form of that, and through that practice, you learn those different things. So that's the Nkom course. That's a $10 course. It was a 4-week course originally. So you'll see there are 4 sessions that we did in 4 weeks, and you'll have access to all those. And then because you were asking about the nature of the soul and the divinity that governs the head, that Okra course, the nature of the soul as the deity governing the head, that was a 6-week course. And because it's archived, instead of $30, it's now $15. And what we're doing in that course is going through the book we just showed, the Okra complex, the nature of the soul, the divinity that governs the head. And we spent 6 weeks going through that. The first 2 courses that we taught in our institution, as far as the institutional aspect of it, was parts 1 and 2 of Dubaku Akrade Abosom. It was 2 separate 6-week courses. You know, part 1 was 6 weeks, part 2 was 6 weeks. We had that introductory session going into detail about the cosmology in general for the first week, and the final 5 weeks of the first course and the other 6 weeks of the second course. That next 11 weeks, we went through each one of these 11 deities in detail. So that course, parts 1 and part 2 exists, and you can access that as well. And when you look on the Akongwa Suya page on the website. I'll put that link in the chat room. Akongwa Suya page. It's odwirafo.com/Akongwa Suya page.html. This is the Akongwa Suya page, and that is our online institution. And when you look through, you'll see a number of 34 different courses. And in addition to those 34, we also have the manhood course and womanhood course, which is 13 weeks each. That's separate, but the 34 courses here, you'll see all these various topics: ritual fasting, ritual celibacy, cyclical fasting, courses on the different books that we have, and ritual practices and so forth. So you'll see all of the flyers on there, and you can see the different topics that are discussed. So that's the link right there. Okay, question. So speaking of an ancestor coming back, what if a person did not have any children? How does that work for them coming back through the great-great-grandchildren? So that's a good question, and we do deal with that in the course that's talking about, reincarnation and so forth. The Uben Shang course, we go into detail about that, but just as a snapshot. And just so you can see this, for example, in the Uben Shang course, we go into some detail about that, about reincarnation and things like that. But so from working from the bottom up, you can see how this works. So you have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, and 8 great-grandparents, and 16 great-great-grandparents, and 32 great-great-great, and 64 great-great-great. So on that level, you have 64 different great-great-great-great-grandparents. Now, an ancestral spirit in the ancestral realm, you know, when they're drawn through, there are 64 people on that line. That means there are 64 gates that they can come through, and they'll come through one of those gates. So, and that's what happened with you. You came through one of those gates. You were connected to one of those ancestors. You were an ancestor of one of those people, and they drew you back into the world. So if you come into the world, you know, through one of those 64 gates and so forth, you come into the world, you're born, you know, grow up and so forth, and you transition before you have any children. No, you wouldn't have children, and then their children and their grandchildren and great-grandchildren and so forth. You wouldn't have, you know, 24, or you wouldn't have like 32 great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren, meaning 32 gates to, you know, through which you could possibly come through, because you never had any children. But you can come through the same way you came through the first time, through that 64 that were above you. You still have those 64 gates above you. It's not just 64, I'm using that as an example. But if it was time for you to come after a couple of hundred years, then there are a number of, you know, people who, you know, branches of the family tree that did have children. Some of those 64, their children and grandchildren had kids, but then they stopped right there, and they didn't have anything after that. So it's nothing in the family tree after that. For some of those along those 64 gates, but on the other branches, some of those had a bunch of children, and you could get through from that branch. The same way you got here the first time is the same branch you can come through this time. But that is important, because when we do have children, if we're involved in culture, then you establish a culture and so forth. So when you bring an ancestor or ancestors back, you're bringing them back and raising them up in the culture that they were the last time they were here on Earth a couple hundred years ago, 140 years ago. They were living as part of a culture, speaking a certain language and so forth. And when you reestablish that, when you bring that child back into the world, that ancestor or ancestors back as a child, you're bringing them back in a purified environment where they can grow up in the culture. Whereas some other people in your family are bringing them back and having them grow up worshiping a fictional cartoon character, Jesus, who never existed, black or white, or a fictional character, Muhammad, or a fictional character, Yahweh or Allah, or Buddha or Brahman, are these fake pseudo-clown fake religions with these fake characters that didn't exist as black individuals, white individuals, or any form at all. So our people are worshiping or aligning themselves with fictional, you know, nonsensical entities, and they're forcing great ancestors and ancestresses to participate in that foolishness. But when you establish a, you know, a blood circle and, you know, a culture within your blood circle, you're allowing those spirits to come back and continue their development. So that's one of the benefits and one of the important reasons to bring these children back into the world. And we talk about that in the Wu Shang in detail. Okay. I do have a Twitter account. It's Odwirafo. Very often, I don't know if it still does. It's usually when I would post a video or anything on YouTube, it would automatically post it on Twitter. I don't use Twitter as much because it's more so just something to let people know what's happening, what's coming up, what we're doing, what class is coming up and stuff like that. So I have to look and see if it's still automatically posting. If it doesn't, I'll have to reset it so it automatically posts every time we do that. I am on Instagram as Odwirafo on Instagram, Kwesi Akan and Odwirafo Akan on Facebook, Odwirafo on TikTok, Odwirafo on Fanbase, which is the Black-owned social media, you know, platform owned by Isaac Hayes III, you know, that's Isaac Hayes and so forth, his descendant. So he has his own platform. It's just like Instagram, except only difference really is the color scheme, and it's Black owned. and they pay the content creators a more fair rate. But if you're getting blocked on Instagram and that kind of foolishness, fan base you want to get on fan base. We need to support our own institutions. Kun Ye is not the only person that has, only Black person that has a social media platform. Okay, if DNA shows that we have Akan ancestry, is it wise to have a divination to determine whether we are supposed to work with our ancestors' religion, or do we assume it because we know we descend from Akan people? So the DNA can give you, hold on one second. The DNA can give you blood-wise, let me make sure I saw everything that you, all right. The DNA can give you blood-wise some of your relations. So for example, we talked about 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great, 32, 64. You go back a few more, you're at 4,096 grandparents. These are different lines that, you know, come from you. So if you use African Ancestry, the Black-owned company out of Howard University, Dr. Rick Kittles and so forth, they have the master plan test to test your mothers going straight back, the mitochondrial DNA line, or the fathers, you know, the Y chromosomal DNA line straight back. So just those 2 lines. But if your father's father married was Akan, but then he married a Yoruba woman, the DNA test wouldn't pick up the Yoruba woman. And if you incarnated from her, if you were a spirit that was drawn through her and got through the line like that, the DNA wouldn't pick up the fact that you're Yoruba. They would just say on your father's side, you're Akan. Now, if you did incarnate from the father's direct lineage, then it picks it up. So it can pick up some things. It may pick up the right thing or it may not. But yes, you need to find out from your people, and you get that from your ancestresses and ancestors. We don't do roots, you know, the Oyatunji village started this notion of roots readings, and there was a reason why they started doing that. And then some other people started doing certain things in association with that. We don't do roots readings per se because it's important for people to establish an Nsama Nkombre, an ancestral shrine, and that journey from first establishing your own shrine to your own people, and then that journey of discovery and them helping you to reconnect with who they are and showing you what they've been showing you all your life since you were a child. That's something we don't want to leapfrog and just say, hey, you're a Wolof. We could do that, but you still need to go back to your people so that they can confirm it. You don't just listen to what somebody says, even if someone says it true. You still don't just, you know, you can acknowledge it, but you need to find out directly from your people and get multiple confirmations, and they will give you multiple confirmations. So that's one of the reasons we don't do quote unquote roots readings, but they can be done. But ultimately, even if they do it, if you went to somebody who said, hey, I just communicated with your Akan ancestors, she said you're Akan, and you know, you were an Akan ancestors with her, and that's your tradition. And if she was 100% correct, that's nice, but you still need to communicate yourself with that Akan ancestors and confirm that yourself and not simply depend on the other person. And there's an experience that goes along with that that's very important, that opens up some energy fields for you as well. So that's very important. Oh no, that's, yeah, no, people ask about that as far as, hold on one second. Okay, what is your preferred ritual invocation? Is it different for everyone? So yeah, so even when you look at the Akradin Bosom, and let me see if, hold on one second, I just want to see if I can find something real quick. There's one particular file I just wanted to see if I can find just to highlight the question you asked about. And I know a couple of people have a couple of more questions, and then we can end it because it's getting a little, we're only supposed to go until 11, but you know, we have some things to get into. I'm just looking for a particular chart if I can find it real quick. All right. So this was a question. Okay, so you asked a question in the chat room about which ritual invocation or ritual invocatory practice is more preferred. It's not necessarily a preference per se. This is one thing that's utilized within our tradition. So we can just share right here real quick. It says Akradin Bosom Ne, Nanasom Neye. We just talked about the Akradin Bosom, 7 days of the week, Akradin Bosom and religious ritual. So we have the divinities of the 7 days of the week, from Awusida Sunday through Menada. So Awusianese, Ajua, Benna, Abena, Wukuakua, Yao and Aba, Fi, Afi, and Ameminiwa, and so forth. When you look at the different days of the week, Adenane, which is ritual balance, there's a way of engaging in ritual balance. Like, for example, if you see a crane, habui bird, or crane standing on one leg and so forth, when you do something with regard to ritual balance, that forces the energy up into your vestibular system, and it's a ritual process. So that's a gateway to the spirit realm. At June, which is ritual song, that's a gateway to the spirit realm. It's a cool gateway. Abosommagua, ritual movement, which is like akin to like qigong or yoga and things like that. That's a gateway to the ancestral realm. Mpayi, which is ritual prayer, that's a gateway to the ancestral realm. Asao, ritual dance, is another gateway to the ritual spirit realm. Kabomo, which is, you know, with your spouse, ritual copulation, is another gateway to the spirit realm. Susu Hon, which is the Akan term for ritual meditation, that's another cool gateway to the spirit realm, and so forth. So based on the 7 days of the week, the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that animate the 7 days of the week, solar, lunar, planetary bodies that govern the 7 days of the week, and the spirits that animate them, all natural cycles in creation. There are also ritual practices. Some are a fiery gateway, a cool gateway, a more watery gateway to the spirit realm. There are different gateways to get to the spirit realm. And based on your energy complex, you're more inclined towards one or more. At some point, you're going to do all of them in some way, some form or fashion, but there are one or more that you're more inclined towards energetically. That's why we have that chart. And then you also have Adibisa, which is divination, Oshue, which is libation, Moja Foribo, which is blood sacrifice, Aforibo, which is offering, Asumai, which are talismans and amulets, and Seso, which are idols and so forth. And of course, idols is sacred, you know, spirituality. This idiocy, talking about idolatry as evil, is pure stupidity. Nkomre, which are shrines and so forth. These are ritual elements, ritual practices, ritual implements, and so forth that are utilized as, you know, magnifiers of your tumi, your divine power, so you can engage the spirit realm as well. So based on your energetic complex, you know, you'll have a natural inclination to one or more. Okay, we're going to take one more question. Will your Okra tell you of your ancestral clan? I am Haitian, which I was told is Fon, but not sure if that is true. So yes, your Okra will, and typically that will have already happened. And then there are a number of different things that, as you engage the ritual process, they will show you, your Okra, as well as your Nsamafo, will show you that they've been laying out for you over the course of a number of years and pushing and prodding you to come in contact with certain individuals, events, circumstances that will leave the signature of your culture on that. You may like various ancestral cultures, but then there'll be one, of course, that you came from, that you are of, incarnate of, that supersedes all of them. And they will show you how they've been telling you that and revealing that to you over the course of a number of years. And that's part of that journey. They already have given it to you. It's already in your cry because you've experienced it. You lived it before you incarnated into the world this particular time. You lived that culture before. This is not the first time you're here. So it's wired within you. It's just the ritual process will open that up. Okay, so there are a couple of things that are coming up. The very next thing that's coming up, let me put this out here. Okay, so Kanche. This is our first annual Conjure Film Festival. Kanche, of course, Kanche means conjure, to utter incantations to bring the spirits forward. Ka and Che, Akan term, and we also spell it out in the language of Kemet because we also show that same term exists in Kemet with the same meaning. The Conjure Film Festival, November 26th, here in Washington, D.C., at the Arc Theater. We're going to be premiering our new film, Hoodoo, Akan Ancestral Religion in North America, which we are completing that film, and we'll have it ready by then. We'll also screen some films by other filmmakers in the conjure genre. Now, the conjure genre is specifically the forms of ancestral religion that we preserved in our blood circles in North America. Those specific traditions will have films in that genre. So that is, and we'll have vendors and we'll have presentations and including, vendors including food and so forth. So that's going on November 26th. This is the Arc Theater, images in the Arc Theater, outside and inside and so forth. We have a certain number of tickets. This is the theater, the seats and so forth. We have a certain number of tickets left available, certain number of seats. So you can purchase tickets on the website, the Kanche Films website, kanchefilms.com. We have a trailer. We're going to put out another trailer and put out some more information, but this is what's coming up November 26th. That's the very next thing. Well, that's the next major thing that's coming up. The very next event, though, which we have a few seats left for this because it's a much smaller venue in Philadelphia next weekend, November 5th. We're going to be talking about Ma'an, Ma'at, and discussing information in our book on Tahuti Sankofa Fa'anifa. A vegan lunch is included with the registration and so forth. So we'll be talking about the male deity Ma'a, the female divinity Ma'at, divine law and balance, and so forth. So that is in Philadelphia. And that's a smaller venue, so we only have a few tickets left for that. When you see the Kanche Film site, that's a theater. So we have a number of seats left for that. Although it's getting close now, it's literally 4 weeks away, so it's still a finite number of seats. But this one, we have about 5 spaces left open for that. But that's Philadelphia at 1 p.m. next Saturday, November 5th. So that's the very next thing coming up. But right after that, November 26th, which happens to be lands on the weekend of the fake holiday and so forth, that Minidad Saturday, the so-called Thanksgiving holiday and so forth. But that particular weekend, that is when we have our film festival. That's the next big thing coming up. And for those of you who are interested in joining us on our trip to Kemet, our next trip to Kemet, May 23rd through the 31st. And this is the Arikat tour. You'll see the information there. We have like 13 videos, clips from the most recent trip we took a number of people to Kemet, 12 cities, 13 sacred sites and so forth, from northern Kemet all the way into Nubia, Kanit, and so forth. So That information is all on the website. There are payment plans, so you can, October, November, December, monthly all the way through up until the beginning of May, you can make monthly payments and so forth. You can craft your own payment plan and so forth. So all of that information is available. We do have some spaces available for the trip to Kemet, but that's May 23rd through the 31st. Okay. Oh, you couldn't see the flyer. Let me see. So can you see the Arikat flyer? This is the trip to Kemet flyer. Let me know if you can see that one. Okay, so that's when we were saying the trip to Kemet. Arikat page on our website. And then maybe you weren't able to see. Okay, can you see the Kanche Films site? Okay. All right, so that's the, if you didn't see that before, that's what we were looking at. This is the poster for the new film that's coming out. This is the first film that we did. If you haven't seen that, it's accessible online. We'll be discussing that film at the festival as well, but we're gonna have other filmmakers. And this is gonna be our first annual film festival. And we created the conjure genre because we need to focus on the traditions that we have preserved in our blood circles in North America. There are festivals that talk about, and people have films on, the Orisha tradition in Brazil, or, the Vodou tradition in Haiti, or the traditions in Nigeria, Ghana, or Ethiopia, whatever it is. But we need to have films, of course, talking about the traditions that we preserve in our blood circles for 300 plus years, once we were forced over here, that we never forgot. So, okay. And the other, if you weren't able to see that other flyer, this is the other flyer. If that one didn't pop up, this is the Ma'at flyer for Philadelphia, November 5th. So, like we said, we have about 5 seats left for that one. And that's next weekend. Well, November 5th, so not this weekend coming up, but next weekend. Okay, so I said we thank everybody for tuning in. We went over by a lot, almost a whole hour, but we need to get that information through. This will be on YouTube. We'll post it up on YouTube. We'll let everybody know when that's posted, and then you can check out the other recent broadcasts and so forth that we have done. And once again, I say we thank everybody for tuning in. And Yabesha Bio, we will meet again.